You are driving to work. The morning light is pleasant, music is playing softly, and you are thinking about the day ahead. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, a car aggressively swerves into your lane, cutting you off and forcing you to slam on your brakes. In the space of a single second, a storm erupts inside you. Your heart hammers against your ribs. Your hands clench the steering wheel until your knuckles are white. A curse, hot and sharp, escapes your lips before you even realize it. Your nervous system is flooded with adrenaline, your body primed for a fight that will never happen. 5 minutes later, the other car is long gone, a forgotten dot in the vastness of the city, its driver completely unaware of the turmoil they have left behind. But the encounter is not over, not for you. The anger sits like a hot stone in your stomach. You replay the event in your mind, imagining all the things you should have said or done. The pleasant morning has been stolen, your peace of mind shattered, your focus for the day ahead already compromised. Now, let us pause and ask a simple question. Who was the real victim of that anger? The other driver is gone, oblivious. You are the one left marinating in the stress hormones, the one with the elevated blood pressure, the one whose inner peace was sacrificed. This experience is what we can call a reaction. A reaction is automatic, instantaneous, and unconscious. It is a program that runs without our consent, fueled by ancient survival instincts and years of ingrained habit. It is the path of least resistance in the brain, a well-worn groove that is easy to fall into but difficult to climb out of. It often leaves us with a lingering sense of regret, of being out of control, a puppet whose strings are being pulled by external events. But there is another way to move through the world. There is an alternative to this powerless state of reactivity. It is called a response. A response, unlike a reaction, is chosen. It is conscious. It is intentional. It comes not from the oldest, most fearful part of our brain, but from a place of clarity, wisdom, and inner balance. The ancient wisdom of Buddhism, confirmed by modern neuroscience, reveals a profound truth. Between the stimulus, the car cutting you off, and your reaction, there exists a space. For most of us, this space is infinitesimally small, a microscopic gap that we flash past in an instant. But within that space, no matter how brief, lies our greatest human power. It is the power to pause, to breathe, to see clearly, and to choose. It is the space where we can interrupt the automatic programming. It is the space where we can let the wave of emotion rise and pass without being swept away by it. This entire journey is about learning how to find that sacred pause. It is about learning how to live in that space and, with practice, how to widen it from a tiny crack into a vast, open field. Within that field of mindful awareness, we reclaim our freedom. We are no longer puppets. We are no longer victims of our own emotional storms. We learn to meet life's challenges, both large and small, not with the blind force of reaction, but with the quiet, dignified strength of a wise response. This is the art of emotional mastery, and it is a skill that anyone, with patience and practice, can learn. We begin by turning our attention to a feeling so common, so deeply ingrained in our human experience, that we often accept it as an unchangeable fact of life. It is the feeling of being a puppet, and of not knowing who holds the strings. Our lives are filled with these moments. A critical email from a boss arrives in our inbox, and instantly, our strings are pulled. Our stomach tightens, our mind begins to race, and a feeling of defensive anxiety floods our system. We are stuck in a traffic jam, and our strings are pulled. Impatience and frustration erupt, our blood pressure rises, and we feel a sense of powerless rage. We post something online, and a stranger leaves a dismissive comment. The strings are pulled again, and we feel the sting of shame or the heat of indignation. In these moments, we are not free. Our sense of well-being, our inner peace, is completely at the mercy of external events and the internal weather of our own emotions. We are living with a hair-trigger heart, a nervous system poised to react to the slightest provocation, leaving us feeling exhausted, regretful, and fundamentally out of control. This is the pain of reactivity. It is a mode of being in which the space between a trigger and our response to it is virtually non-existent. The stimulus happens, and the old, familiar, conditioned program runs instantly and automatically. Let us map this landscape in our own lives. for seeing it clearly is the first step toward changing it. Consider the sting of criticism. A loved one makes a casual comment about a habit of yours. Before you can even think, you feel a jolt. The defenses go up. Your voice becomes sharp as you justify your behavior, or perhaps you turn the criticism back on them, pointing out one of their flaws. Or maybe you just shut down completely, withdrawing into a cold, resentful silence. The reaction is instantaneous, a reflex as automatic as pulling your hand from a hot stove. Now consider the opposite, the intoxication of praise. You receive a compliment on your work. The reaction is a pleasant rush, a swelling of the ego. You feel good, but you also begin to cling to that feeling, wanting more of it. And a subtle anxiety is born, the fear that you won't be able to live up to this praise in the future. Your peace has become dependent on another person's approval. Think of the daily frustrations of modern life. The Wi-Fi signal is weak. The person in front of you in line is fumbling for change. The delivery is late. The reaction is a wave of irritation, an inner monologue of complaint that sours your mood. Or consider the anxiety of uncertainty. You send an important text message and see that it has been read, but there is no immediate reply. The reactive mind doesn't wait for information. It instantly begins to write a story, a catastrophic story of rejection, of being ignored, of having done something wrong. In all these instances, the feeling is one of being hijacked. We are no longer driving the car. We have been thrown into the back seat, while our reactive habits have taken the wheel. To understand why this happens, why a seemingly small event can create such a large and messy inner disturbance, let us use an analogy. Imagine your mind is a beautiful, clear pond. On a calm day, when the water is still, it perfectly reflects the blue sky, the drifting clouds, and the green trees along its bank. The water is so clear you can see all the way to the smooth pebbles at the bottom. This is the mind in a state of peace and clarity. Now, imagine someone throws a small stone into the pond. The stone represents a trigger event, a critical comment, a traffic jam, an unanswered text. The initial splash is the event itself, the first arrow of life's unavoidable pain. It creates a few ripples, and that is all. But this is not what happens in a reactive mind. In a reactive mind, the bottom of the pond is covered with a thick layer of mud and siltall of our unresolved anger, our latent insecurities, our old fears, and our past hurts. When the small stone hits the water, its impact doesn't just create ripples, it churns up all of that mud from the bottom. Suddenly, the entire pond becomes murky, brown, and opaque. It can no longer reflect the sky. It has lost its inherent clarity and beauty, and it can take a very, very long time for all of that mud to slowly settle back down. This is the mechanism of our reactivity. The external event is just the small stone. The massive, painful, emotional reaction, the murky water, comes from the unresolved material we are already carrying within us. The person who cut you off in traffic did not give you your rage. They simply stirred up the rage that was already dormant within you. The critical comment didn't create your feeling of inadequacy. It activated the feeling of inadequacy that was already there. Understanding this is profoundly empowering. It means the solution is not to try to build a wall around our pond to prevent anyone from ever throwing a stone in. That is an impossible, life-denying task. The real work is to begin the patient, compassionate process of purifying the water, of cleaning the mud and silt from the bottom of our own pond. But first, we must be honest about the cost of living with muddy water. The cost of a reactive life is immense. It damages our relationships. We say things we don't mean to the people we love the most. We wound our partners, our children, and our friends with the sharp edges of our unexamined reactions. Over time, this erodes trust and creates distance, leaving us feeling lonely and misunderstood. A life of reactivity also takes a severe toll on our physical and mental health. Living with a hair-trigger nervous system means our bodies are constantly being flooded with the stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline. This leads to chronic tension, poor sleep, a weakened immune system, and a pervasive sense of being burned out and on edge. And then there is the emotional hangover of regret. How many hours have we wasted replaying a past event, tormenting ourselves with thoughts of, why did I say that? Why did I do that? This pattern of reacting, regretting, and then reacting again in the same way is a painful cycle of self-imprisonment. When our minds are constantly clouded by the mud of our own reactions, we lose access to our deeper wisdom. We cannot see situations clearly, so we make poor decisions. We cannot hear the quiet voice of our own intuition because it is drowned out by the shouting of our reactive emotions. To acknowledge this pain is not an act of self-criticism. It is an act of profound self-compassion. It is the necessary first step. We must see, with clarity and kindness, the ways in which our own conditioned habits are causing us to suffer. This clear seeing provides the motivation, the sincere desire to find another way. It allows us to ask the most important question we can ask. Must it be this way? The answer offered by 2,500 years of Buddhist practice is a resounding, hopeful number. Freedom is possible. But it is not a freedom from the stones of life. It is the freedom of a clear pond, a mind so deep and placid that when the stones of life inevitably land, they create only the smallest of ripples and then sink peacefully to the bottom, without stirring up any mud at all. To understand more deeply why we suffer so much from these reactions, why a single, small stone can create such a large and painful mess, we must turn to one of the most practical and insightful teachings of the Buddha. It is a teaching that masterfully separates the initial event from the layers of suffering we add on top of it. It is the crucial wisdom of the two arrows. We have acknowledged the deep and pervasive pain caused by our own reactivity. We have seen how a single trigger, a small stone thrown into the pond of our mind, can churn up a world of mud and turmoil, obscuring our clarity and stealing our peace. This leads to a crucial and compassionate inquiry. Why are we so vulnerable? Why does a single, passing event have the power to cause such lasting inner disruption? To answer this, we must turn to one of the most practical and liberating teachings the Buddha ever offered. It is a teaching that elegantly dissects the anatomy of our suffering and, in doing so, reveals the precise point where our freedom can be found. It is the wisdom of the two arrows. The Buddha began by stating a simple, undeniable truth. To be alive is to experience pain. As long as we have a human body and a human heart, we will be subject to life's inevitable difficulties. Sickness, injury, loss, disappointment, old age, and death. These are universal human experiences. No amount of positive thinking or spiritual practice will make us completely immune to them. This unavoidable pain of life is the first arrow. Imagine you are walking through a forest and you are suddenly struck in the arm by an arrow. There is a sharp, immediate, and undeniable sensation of pain. It is real. It is unpleasant. This is the first arrow. In our daily lives, the first arrow can be a headache, a critical comment from our partner, a project that fails at work, or the grief of losing someone we love. These are the painful, objective events of life that are largely outside of our control. Now, the Buddha said that an ordinary, uninstructed person, when struck by that first arrow, does not stop there. Immediately after the initial shock and pain, they begin to grieve, lament, and despair. They think to themselves, "Why did this happen to me? This is terrible. I can't bear this. What did I do to deserve this?" Their mind begins to spin a story of victimhood, injustice, and fear. This story, this mental and emotional reaction to the initial pain, is the second arrow, which they promptly shoot into the exact same spot where the first arrow landed. And then perhaps they fire a third arrow of self-criticism. "I should have been more careful." And a fourth arrow of anxiety. "What if it gets infected and I lose my arm?" The Buddha explained that the true suffering, the deep, prolonged and agonizing experience of misery, does not come from the first arrow. It comes from the second, third, and all the subsequent arrows that we shoot into ourselves. The well-instructed disciple of the noble ones, on the other hand, when struck by a first arrow, also feels the pain. They are not superhuman. They feel the sting, but that is where it ends. They do not automatically fire the second arrow of mental anguish. They see the painful feeling for what it is, simply a painful feeling. They observe it with a calm, non-reactive awareness. They do not add a story to it. They do not resist it. They allow the initial pain to be there, knowing that it, like all things, is impermanent and will pass. The difference between a life of ordinary suffering and a life of profound peace, the Buddha taught, is not the avoidance of the first arrow, but the learned skill of not firing the second. Let us bring this ancient wisdom into the landscape of our modern lives. Think of having a chronic pain condition. like a bad back. The physical sensation of pain, the aching, the stiffness, the sharp twinges that is the first arrow. It is unpleasant, but it is just a physical sensation. The second arrows are the thoughts we add. My life is ruined. I can't do the things I used to love. This is never going to get better. Why me? This is so unfair. This mental narrative, filled with despair and self-pity, is what transforms the physical pain into deep, emotional suffering. It is what creates the depression and hopelessness that so often accompany chronic pain. Consider a social situation. You are at a gathering and you see a group of friends laughing and talking, but they didn't include you. The initial, fleeting sting of feeling left out is the first arrow. It is a momentary ouch. The second arrows begin to fly immediately after. They don't like me. I'm boring. There must be something wrong with me. I always get left out. I'm going to end up alone. These thoughts of self-criticism, generalization, and catastrophic fantasy are the second, third, and fourth arrows. They take a small, passing moment of social discomfort and weave it into a heavy cloak of shame and loneliness. This pattern plays out everywhere. You make a mistake on a report at work. The first arrow is the brief, hot flush of embarrassment when your boss points it out. The second arrow is the inner critic's voice screaming, "You're an idiot. You're so incompetent. You're going to get fired. Everyone here knows you're a fraud. You have a disagreement with your partner." The first arrow is the hurt you feel from their words. The second arrow is your mind replaying their words over and over, building a case against them, remembering all the other times they have wronged you, and deciding that the relationship is doomed. In every case, the initial wound is relatively small and clean. It is our own reaction, our own mental proliferation, that makes the wound infected, inflamed, and agonizing. The good news is that the second arrow is entirely optional. It is self-inflicted, and because we are the ones firing it, we can also be the ones to choose to put the bow down. The practice of emotional mastery is the practice of learning to drop the second arrow. So how do we do this? It begins with mindfulness. When a first arrow strikes a difficult conversation, a painful sensation, a disappointing event, the first step is to pause, take a breath, and simply acknowledge the raw experience. Instead of launching into a story, we turn our attention to the direct, physical reality of the moment. We can say to ourselves, "This is a feeling of hurt," or "A painful sensation is present in my back," or "This is what disappointment feels like in the body." We meet the first arrow with a simple, non-judgmental awareness. The second step is to become a vigilant guardian of our own mind. We watch for the second arrow. We notice the mind's powerful, deeply ingrained habit of wanting to tell a story. We see the narrative beginning to form. "This is terrible. It's not fair. I'm a failure." We see this thought arising as just a thought, not as the absolute truth. And in that moment of seeing, we have a choice. We can either pick up that second arrow, place it on the bowstring of our mind, and let it fly, deepening our own wound, or we can choose to let it drop. We can see the story, acknowledge it. There's the story of "I'm a failure," and then gently let it go, returning our attention to our breath, or to the raw sensation of the first arrow. We learn to bear the clean pain of the first arrow without adding the dirty, complicated suffering of the second. We learn that we can survive the first arrow. In fact, bearing it with mindful, compassionate presence is what makes us stronger and wiser. Life will never stop shooting first arrows at us. To be in a relationship is to risk the first arrow of heartbreak. To create something new is to risk the first arrow of failure. To love is to risk the first arrow of loss. The path of wisdom is not about building thicker armor to deflect these arrows. Such armor would wall us off from life itself, leaving us numb and isolated. The path of wisdom is to develop the skill, the courage, and the compassion to feel the sting of the first arrow fully, without ever picking up the second. Our suffering is not what happens to us. Our suffering is what we add to what happens to us. And in that space, between the event and what we add to it, lies our power, our peace, and our ultimate freedom. This habit of firing the second arrow, of adding layers of mental anguish to our initial pain, is deeply and powerfully ingrained in us. For most of us, it is a completely unconscious reflex. It is a kind of programming that runs automatically without our consent. To understand why we are so quick to inflict this extra suffering upon ourselves, we must now look into the very nature of how our minds create and reinforce these powerful, automatic habits. We must explore the world of the autopilot mind. We have now been introduced to the profound wisdom of the two arrows. We see that while the first arrow of life's inevitable pain cannot be avoided, the second arrow of our own mental and emotional reaction is something we inflict upon ourselves. This is a liberating insight, but it immediately raises a critical question. If this second arrow is optional, why do we fire it so consistently? Why does our reaction to pain, criticism, or frustration feel so automatic, so instantaneous, that it seems we have no choice at all? To answer this, we must go deeper into the architecture of the human mind. We must understand that for much of our lives, we are not consciously driving. We are operating on a powerful and deeply ingrained system of autopilot. Imagine a vast open landscape. The first time you walk across it, you can choose any path you like. But if you walk the same route every day, a faint trail begins to form in the grass. After weeks, it becomes a clear path. After years, it becomes a deep, well-worn groove, a rut in the earth. Now, when you enter that landscape, your feet will almost automatically find their way into that familiar groove. It takes a conscious effort to choose a different route. This is precisely how our minds work. Every time we think a thought, feel an emotion, or react to a situation in a particular way, we are carving one of these grooves in the mind. In the Buddhist tradition, these habitual patterns, these mental formations and tendencies, are known as sankhara. They are the invisible architects of our reactive life. This ancient understanding of the mind is remarkably consistent with the discoveries of modern neuroscience. When we repeat a thought or an action, the connections between the neurons involved in that process are strengthened. The brain, in its quest for efficiency, creates a kind of neurological shortcut. Neurons that fire together, wire together, as the saying goes. A reactive pattern, like lashing out in anger when frustrated, is a superhighway in our brain. A new, skillful response, like pausing to take a breath, is like a tiny, overgrown footpath. When a trigger event occurs, our mental energy, like water flowing downhill, will naturally pour down the wide, deep, familiar channel of the superhighway. This is why our reactions feel so powerful and so automatic. They are the path of least resistance in our own minds. These deep grooves, these sankharas, are not formed overnight. Their origins often lie deep in our personal history. Many are carved in our childhood. If we grew up in a family where criticism was common, we may have developed a deep reactive groove of defensiveness or shame that gets activated even by gentle feedback in our adult lives. If we were praised for being quiet and accommodating, we may have a powerful habit of suppressing our own needs and feelings to avoid conflict. These patterns were often intelligent survival strategies at the time. A child who learns to be invisible to avoid an angry parent is using a skillful means to stay safe. The tragedy is that these outdated programs continue to run on the autopilot of our adult minds, causing us to react to our loving partner as if they were a threatening parent, long after the original danger has passed. Sometimes a single powerful event can carve a deep channel all at once. A single, traumatic experiencer, painful betrayal, a moment of intense public humiliation. A sudden loss can create a powerful sankhara that shapes our reactions for decades. We are left with a deep groove of suspicion, of fear, or of grief. And any event that even remotely resembles the original trauma will send our emotional energy rushing down that same painful channel. We are not reacting to the present moment, we are reliving the past. When we see this clearly, we can begin to have immense compassion for ourselves. Our reactivity is not a sign that we are bad or broken. It is a sign that we are carrying a history. We are operating on old programming. The spiritual path, then, is not one of self-blame, but one of gentle, conscious reprogramming. There is a famous story that beautifully illustrates how we can become prisoners of our own past conditioning. A man once visited a circus and was astounded by the sight of the magnificent, powerful elephants. He watched them perform incredible feats of strength. Later, however, he saw one of these same giant creatures standing quietly in its enclosure. He was shocked to see that the elephant was being held in place by nothing more than a small, thin rope tied from its leg to a simple wooden stake pushed into the ground. The man was completely baffled. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this colossal animal could snap that rope or uproot that stake with a single, effortless tug of its leg. He approached the elephant's trainer and asked, "Why does this powerful creature not just walk away? Why does it allow itself to be held by such a flimsy rope?" The trainer replied, "Well, when this elephant was just a baby, and very much smaller, we used this exact same rope and stake to tie him up. At that young age, the rope was strong enough to hold him. He would struggle and pull for hours, day after day, but he could not break free. Eventually, he learned that the rope was stronger than he was, and he accepted it as an unchangeable reality. He gave up trying." The trainer paused, looking at the giant, placid animal. "Now," he said, "even though he has the strength of 10 men and could walk away in an instant, he never tries. The idea that he cannot break free is so deeply ingrained in his mind that he never questions it. He is held captive, not by the rope, but by the memory of the rope. We are all that circus elephant. We are held in place by the invisible ropes of our old conditioning, our sankharas. We are constrained by beliefs and reactive patterns we formed when we were younger and more vulnerable. We have the strength now to break free, but it often doesn't even occur to us to try. We have accepted our own reactivity, your short temper, our social anxiety, our tendency to shut down as a permanent part of our personality, an unchangeable fact of who we are. But it is not. It is just a rope. It is just a memory, and we have the power to see it for what it is. The practice of mindfulness is the act of becoming aware of the rope. When a trigger happens and the familiar reaction begins to arise, the moment of mindfulness is when we see, this is the old anger pattern again. This is the rope of anxiety. In that moment of seeing, we create a choice. For the first time, we can choose not to pull against the rope in the old, habitual way. We can stop. We can breathe. We can investigate the rope itself. We can see how thin and frayed it has become. And we can realize that we have the strength now to choose a different path. Every time we notice a reactive habit and consciously choose a new, wiser response, we are refusing to walk down the old, deep groove. Instead, we are stepping onto the grass beside it and starting to forge a new trail. At first, this new trail is faint and requires conscious effort, but every time we walk it, it becomes clearer and easier to follow. With patience and repetition, this new path of wise response can become our new superhighway, the new, healthy autopilot that guides us toward peace instead of pain. Our automatic reactions, then, are not our fault, but they are our responsibility. They are not a sign of our inherent weakness, but a testament to our history. To see our mind as a conditioned landscape of these grooves allows us to stop blaming ourselves for our reactions and instead take on the compassionate and empowering work of a gardener or a programmer, gently and patiently reshaping the terrain of our own heart. We are not the elephant forever bound by a tiny rope. We are the consciousness that can finally see the rope for the illusion it is, and with that seeing, take the first step toward walking free. These deeply carved channels of habit, these sankharas, explain the mechanism of our reactivity. They are the pathways our mental energy naturally flows down. But what is the energy itself? What is the fuel that rushes down these channels and powers our automatic reactions? To understand this, we must look at the 3 fundamental drivers of the unawakened mind, the forces that give our habits their immense power. We must now explore the 3 great poisons. We have peered into the inner workings of our own minds and seen how our automatic reactions are not random, but flow down well-worn grooves, the habitual patterns the Buddha called sankharas. We have seen that we are like the circus elephant, held captive not by a real rope, but by the memory of one. This understanding brings compassion, but it also begs a deeper question. What is the energy that flows so powerfully down these channels? What is the fuel that makes the fire of our reactivity burn so hot and so quickly? A riverbed is just a path. It is the force of the water that does the carving. What is the water in our minds? The Buddha's answer to this is both profound and startlingly direct. He taught that all of our reactive suffering, all of the self-inflicted pain from the second arrow, is fueled by 3 fundamental energies. He called them the 3 poisons. This language might seem harsh, but it is meant to be diagnostic, not judgmental. A poison is something that, when ingested, creates sickness and suffering. The Buddha was pointing out that these three energies, when we allow them to run our lives, inevitably lead to a state of inner sickness. They are not personal moral failings or sins. They are universal tendencies of the unenlightened human mind. Learning to recognize them in our own experience is like learning to identify poisonous plants in the forest. It is a crucial skill for our survival and our well-being. These three poisons are greed, hatred, and delusion. The first poison is greed, or craving. In Pali, the word is lobha or tanha. This is the energy of I want. It is the constant pulling and grasping for pleasant experiences. It is the thirst for more possessions, more pleasure, more praise, more security, more love. This is the energy of the clenched fist, the mind that is always reaching, always trying to pull the world toward itself. It is the belief that our inner emptiness can be filled by something external. This poison of greed is a primary fuel for our reactivity. When we do not get what we want, when we are denied the promotion, when our text message goes unanswered, when our partner doesn't give us the affection we crave, this thwarted desire instantly triggers a reaction. We might react with frustration, anxiety, envy, or despair. The intensity of our reaction is directly proportional to the strength of our initial craving. Even when we do get what we want, the poison still works on us. We get the new car, and we immediately react with the fear of it getting scratched. We receive the praise, and we immediately react with the anxiety of having to live up to that new standard. Greed ensures we are never at peace, because it is the engine of not enough. It is a thirst that, as we have seen, can never be permanently quenched. The second poison is hatred, or aversion. In Pali, the word is dosa. This is the opposite energy of greed. It is the energy of I don't want. It is the forceful pushing away of unpleasant or painful experiences. While greed pulls the world in, aversion violently shoves it away. Dosa exists on a vast spectrum. At its mildest, it is a subtle feeling of irritation or impatience. It is the annoyance you feel when you are stuck in traffic, or when someone is chewing their food too loudly. It can manifest as judgment, criticism, and blame. At its most intense, it becomes searing rage, resentment, and a desire to destroy. This poison is perhaps the most obvious fuel for our explosive, reactive behavior. Aversion is the energy behind every angry outburst, every defensive justification, every cold shoulder. When we are faced with something we don't like, a criticism, a difficult person, a painful sensation, the energy of dosa arises and demands, "Get this away from me." Our reaction is the attempt to follow that command. We lash out, we argue, we withdraw, all in a futile attempt to destroy or escape the unpleasant experience. Aversion is the engine of conflict, both internal and external. The third poison is the most subtle, the most pervasive, and the most dangerous. It is the root from which the other two poisons grow. It is delusion, or ignorance. The Pali word is moha. Now, ignorance here does not mean a lack of factual information or a low intellect. A person can have multiple PhDs and still be completely submerged in the poison of moha. Delusion is a fundamental misperception of reality. It is the distorted, foggy lens through which the unenlightened mind views the world. It is the darkness that makes us mistake the poison of greed and aversion for medicine. What, specifically, does delusion misunderstand? It misunderstands the fundamental truths we have been exploring. It ignores the truth of impermanence, anicca. Delusion is what makes us believe that acquiring a new possession or a new relationship will bring us lasting happiness. It forgets that all things are subject to change and decay. Delusion also ignores the truth of no self, anatta. It operates under the absolute conviction that there is a solid, separate, continuous me at the center of the universe, whose desires must be satisfied and whose territory must be defended at all costs. This mistaken identity is what makes a simple criticism feel like a life or death threat. Finally, delusion ignores the truth of suffering, dukkha. It stubbornly believes that a life of constant pleasure and no discomfort is possible, and that we should therefore demand it from the world, leading to endless frustration when the world fails to deliver. Delusion is the faulty plumbing in the house of the mind. It is because of delusion that we turn to the tap of greed, believing it will quench our thirst, only to find it pours out salt water that makes us thirstier. It is because of delusion that we turn to the tap of aversion, believing it will protect us, only to find it pours out fire that burns our own hands. Delusion is the foundational confusion that keeps us trapped in the cycle of reactivity. Let's take the simple example of being cut off in traffic. The poison of craving says, I want to get to my destination on time, and I want to be respected. The poison of aversion says, I don't want this car in front of me, I don't want to be disrespected. And the poison of delusion provides the flawed operating system for it all. That driver is a bad person, a fixed, solid self. My anger is righteous and will somehow fix this situation. This minor event has the power to ruin my entire day. We can see how the three poisons work together seamlessly to create a single, powerful, and painful reactive moment. Our mind, then, is like a house with three poisoned wells. Whenever we are thirsty for happiness or safety, we instinctively run to one of these wells, forgetting every time that they offer no real nourishment, only more suffering. Learning to see these poisons at work within ourselves is a transformative step. When you feel a reactive urge beginning to surge, you can start to ask yourself, with gentle curiosity, which poison is this? Am I feeling the pull of wanting something? That is greed. Am I feeling the push of not wanting something? That is aversion. And am I believing a limited, self-centered story about the situation? That is delusion. Simply identifying the poison as it arises begins to rob it of its power. You are no longer just an angry person. You are a person who is observing the energy of aversion as it moves through you. You are creating the space of mindful awareness. Seeing our reactivity as a combination of habitual pathways, the sankharas, fueled by the potent energies of greed, aversion, and delusion, can feel discouraging. It can seem like an unbreakable system, a house with faulty plumbing that can never be fixed. But the Buddha did not just describe the prison in meticulous detail. He gave us the key to unlock the door. The key is not a grand, complicated philosophy. It is not something you have to earn or be worthy of. It is a simple, profound, and accessible power that we all possess. A way to shut off the tap before we drink the poison. It is the power to find a space between the trigger and our reaction. It is the power of the pause. We have now stared into the heart of our own reactive patterns. We have seen how the deep grooves of our past conditioning, our sankharas, provide the channels, and how the potent energies of the three poisons, greed, aversion, and delusion provide the fuel for our automatic, and often painful, responses to life. To see this system at work can feel disheartening. It can seem like a perfectly sealed, inescapable prison, a house with poisoned plumbing where every tap delivers suffering. We might feel like the circus elephant, forever bound by an invisible rope we do not know how to break. But the Buddha's path is not one of despair. He did not just provide a flawless diagnosis of our condition, he also offered the key to unlock the prison door. This key is not hidden in some esoteric text or available only to advanced mystics. It is a power that every single one of us possesses, a faculty that is waiting patiently to be remembered and used. It is the simple, world-changing power of the pause. The psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, in his profound book, Man's Search for Meaning, wrote of a discovery he made in the midst of unimaginable suffering. He saw that even when everything was taken from a person, their home, their family, their dignity, their freedom, there was one last freedom that could never be taken away. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." This insight, forged in the crucible of one of history's darkest chapters, is a perfect echo of the central teaching the Buddha offered 2,500 years earlier. The Buddha taught that the entire path to liberation is found in discovering and inhabiting that very space. For most of us, when a stimulus occurs, a critical remark, a frustrating delay, that space collapses in an instant. The stimulus and the reaction become fused into a single, explosive event. There is no space, and therefore, no choice. The practice of mindfulness, or sati, is the systematic training of the mind to find and widen that space. It is the practice of inserting a conscious moment of awareness between the event and our habitual reaction to it. Think of reactivity as a spark landing in a puddle of gasoline. The explosion is immediate and destructive. Mindfulness is like a gentle rain that begins to fall. Just as the spark is flying through the air, it dampens the ground. The spark still lands, but instead of an explosion, it simply fizzles out with a quiet hiss. The trigger event, the first arrow, still happens. The gentle rain of mindfulness prevents the fiery explosion of the second arrow. It acts as a universal circuit breaker for the reactive mind. This might sound wonderful in theory, but how do we apply it in the heat of the moment, when we feel our anger or anxiety begin to surge? For this, we can use a simple, memorable, and profoundly effective practice. A kind of emergency brake for the reactive mind. The practice can be remembered by the acronym STOP. The S stands for stop. This is the first and most radical step. The moment you feel the jolt of a reactive emotion, the heat of anger, the tightness of anxiety, the sting of shame, the practice is to simply stop everything. Freeze. If you are about to speak, close your mouth. If you are about to type an angry email, take your hands off the keyboard. If you are about to storm out of the room, plant your feet on the floor. You consciously and deliberately halt the forward momentum of the reaction. This single act is an immense assertion of your power. You are refusing to be hijacked. You are interrupting the autopilot program before it can fully engage. The T stands for take a breath. In the space you have just created by stopping, you intentionally bring your full attention to the process of breathing. Take one deep, conscious breath, or maybe 2 or 3. This is not just a way to kill time. It is a powerful, physiological intervention. When you are in a reactive state, your body's sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, is activated. A slow, deep, deliberate breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's braking system. It sends a direct signal to your brain and body that the immediate threat has passed. It lowers your heart rate, relaxes your muscles, and brings you out of the catastrophic story in your head and into the physical reality of the present moment. The breath is your anchor in the storm. The O stands for observe. Now that you have created a moment of stillness and have begun to calm your physiology, you turn your attention inward with a gentle, non-judgmental curiosity. You become a scientist of your own inner experience. What is actually happening inside me right now? You might notice the physical sensations, a tightness in the throat, a burning in the chest, a hollow feeling in the stomach. You just notice them without needing them to be different. You might notice the emotions, anger, fear, sadness. You name them softly to yourself. Ah, this is anger. And you might notice the story the mind is trying to tell you. He always disrespects me, or I'm going to fail. You observe these thoughts as just thoughts, mental events, not as the absolute truth. In this step, you are separating yourself from the reaction. You are no longer possessed by it. You are the calm, curious awareness that is observing it. Finally, the P stands for proceed. Having stopped, taken a breath, and observed the inner landscape, you are now in a completely different position. You are no longer a puppet. You are now a conscious agent. From this place of relative clarity and balance, you can choose how to proceed. The wisest choice might be to say nothing at all. It might be to ask a gentle, clarifying question. It might be to express your feeling using calm, non-accusatory language. It might be to compassionately excuse yourself from the situation. The specific action is less important than the quality behind it. You are now responding from a place of wisdom, rather than reacting from a place of wounded habit. You have successfully navigated the sacred pause. Think of a wise general in charge of a great army. An impulsive, foolish general, upon hearing from a scout that there is enemy movement on the western flank, immediately reacts. He sends all of his troops rushing to the west in a panic, without a second thought. But a wise general operates differently. When she receives the same report, she does not react. She pauses. She climbs a hill to get a better vantage point. She observes the entire battlefield, the enemy's movements, yes, but also the terrain, the weather, the position of her own forces, the location of her supply lines. She sees the whole picture. Only then, from that place of expanded perspective, does she calmly and strategically deploy her troops. The impulsive general is easily tricked, easily overwhelmed, and often defeated. The wise general, who understands the power of the pause, is the one who leads her army to victory. Our mind is this battlefield. To react to every stimulus is to be a foolish general, constantly rushing from one small crisis to another. To practice the sacred pause is to become the wise general of our own lives. This power is available to us in every moment. The space between stimulus and response may seem vanishingly small at first, but with practice, it begins to expand. The length of a single, conscious breath can be the difference between a lifetime of regret and an action you can be proud of. It is the difference between being a slave to your own conditioning and being the master of your own mind. It is the difference between the clenched fist and the open hand. The stop. Practice is a lifeline, an emergency brake we can pull anytime we feel ourselves being dragged under by the powerful currents of our own reactivity. It is the key that opens the door from the prison of reaction to the wide, open field of wise response. The stop practice gives us the essential gift of a pause. The O in stop stands for observe. But what exactly are we observing when we turn our attention inward? We are learning to look at the very texture of our emotional life, not as a solid command that must be obeyed, but as a constantly shifting impersonal process. We are learning to watch the ever-changing weather of the mind. We have discovered the sacred pause. We have learned that through the simple, intentional practice of stopping, taking a breath, observing, and then proceeding, we can create a space between the world's triggers and our habitual reactions. This space is the gateway to our freedom. The O in this practice, the act of observing, is where the deepest transformation occurs. But what exactly are we observing in that precious quiet pause? To answer this, we must learn to look at our own emotional life in a radically new way. Our lifelong habit is to experience our emotions as solid, personal, and all-encompassing. We don't just have a feeling, we become the feeling. A wave of anger arises and we declare, "I am angry." A current of sadness pulls at us and we say, "I am sad." In this way, we fuse our entire identity with a temporary, passing mental state. We mistake a fleeting weather pattern for the sky itself. The Buddhist path invites us to become meteorologists of our own minds, to watch the weather with curiosity and clarity, rather than being tossed about by it. To do this, we must first understand the anatomy of an emotion. Before a complex, story-laden emotion, like anger or jealousy, takes hold, there is a much simpler, more fundamental event that occurs in the mind. This is what is known in Buddhism as Vedana, which translates as feeling tone. Every single moment of our experience, whether it comes through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or thinking, is immediately tagged by the mind with one of three feeling tones. It is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. You taste a sweet piece of fruit, a pleasant Vedana arises. You hear a loud, jarring noise, an unpleasant Vedana arises. You feel the sensation of your clothes on your skin. A neutral Vedana usually arises. This feeling tone is the seed of our entire reactive process. An unpleasant feeling tone arises, and the untrained mind, driven by the poison of aversion, immediately reacts with, "I don't want this, get it away." From that initial reaction, a whole story blossoms. That noise is so annoying. The person making it is so inconsiderate. My peace is ruined. And now, we are no longer just experiencing an unpleasant sensation. We are fully caught in the complex, suffering, filled emotion of anger. The practice of deep observation is to intervene earlier in the process. It is to learn to notice the raw feeling tone itself before we have wrapped it in a story and identified with it. It is to see unpleasant feeling arising instead of immediately jumping to, "I am angry." How do we do this in practice? How do we observe a powerful emotion without getting swept away? The key is to shift our attention from the story in our head to the raw sensations in our body. The story is the fuel. The bodily sensations are the fire itself. When we stop adding the fuel of thought, the fire naturally burns out. Let's say someone cuts you off in traffic and you feel a surge of rage. You use the stop practice. You halt the carnal urge to honk or shout. You take a breath. Now you observe. Instead of focusing on the story, that person is a menace. They could have killed me. You drop your attention completely out of your head and into your body. You ask with genuine curiosity, where is this anger in my body? And what does it feel like as a pure physical sensation? You might discover that what you call anger is actually a constellation of sensations. A hot, flushing feeling rising up your neck and into your face. A tense, painful clamping in your jaw and shoulders. A rapid, shallow breathing pattern. A buzzing electric energy in your hands and arms, priming them to clench into fists. You just observe these sensations. You don't judge them. You don't name them bad. You just notice. There is heat in the chest. There is tightness in the jaw. There is vibration in the hands. By translating the loaded, personal label of my anger into a series of simple, impersonal physical events, you perform a kind of magic. The emotion loses its personal charge. It is no longer you. It is just an impersonal energy pattern moving through your body. The same applies to other difficult emotions. When you feel anxiety, drop the story about the future and feel the raw sensations. You might discover that anxiety is a cold, churning knot in your stomach, a tightness around your throat, and a shaky, trembling feeling in your legs. It's just energy. When you feel sadness, let go of the story of your loss for a moment and feel its physical expression. It might be a heavy, leaden weight on your chest, an ache in the back of your throat, a feeling of being hollowed out and drained of energy. When you relate to your emotions in this way, as pure, physical, and energetic phenomena, you are no longer their victim, you are their witness. The most powerful metaphor for this practice is that of the sky and the clouds. For most of our lives, we live with the mistaken belief that we are the clouds. When a dark, turbulent storm cloud of anger appears in our mind, we believe, I am a storm. When a heavy grey fog of sadness rolls in, we believe, I am a sad, foggy person. When a pleasant, white, fluffy cloud of happiness drifts by, we cling to it desperately, believing, this is me. This is who I should be all the time. Because we identify with the weather, our inner state is completely at the mercy of its constant changes. The profound truth offered by this path is that you are not the clouds, you are not the weather, you are the sky. Your true nature, the vast, open, and luminous awareness that is reading these words right now, is like the sky itself. The sky is inherently peaceful and spacious. It is never damaged or stained by the weather that passes through it. The sky allows all clouds to arise, the beautiful, the boring, and the terrifying. It does not try to hold on to the pretty clouds or push away the stormy ones. It provides a vast, accommodating, and unconditional space for all of it to simply be, to do what it does, and to eventually pass away. The practice of mindfulness is the practice of learning to rest in our sky-like nature. When an emotion arises, we learn to recognize it as a cloud. Here is a cloud of anger passing through my sky. Here is a cloud of fear. We can watch it, feel its energetic rain or wind, and know, with unshakable certainty, that it is not us, and that it will pass. The sky does not fight the storm. It simply allows the storm to exhaust its own energy. By resting as the sky, you find that you are bigger than any emotion, bigger than any mood. Your peace is no longer conditional. It is the very nature of your being. Our emotions are not our enemies. They are not us. They are simply impersonal, transient patterns of energy and sensation, like the weather passing through the vast sky of our awareness. They carry information, but they are not commands that must be obeyed. By learning to stop identifying with them, we stop being controlled by them. By observing them with a kind and spacious attention, we rob them of their power to hijack our lives. We learn to rest in the stable, peaceful clarity of the sky, rather than being endlessly tossed about by the turbulence of the clouds. This practice of observing the weather of the mind, of abiding as the spacious sky, is transformative. It creates a profound distance between our true self and the emotional turbulence we experience. However, when the storm is particularly strong, when the winds of grief or rage are howling, it can be difficult to simply rest as the sky. We feel like we are about to be swept away. In these moments, we need an anchor. We need something reliable and ever-present that can hold us steady in the heart of the present moment, while the storm blows through. This is where we turn to the most faithful and accessible anchor we possess, our own breath. We have learned to see ourselves not as the fleeting, turbulent weather of our emotions, but as the vast, open, and ever-present sky. This is a profound shift in perspective, a source of immense space and freedom. It allows us to watch the clouds of anger, fear, and sadness drift through us without identifying with them, without being possessed by them. But we must be honest. There are times when the weather is not just a passing shower or a gentle breeze. There are times when a hurricane descends upon us. There are moments when the winds of rage are so powerful, the storm surge of grief is so overwhelming, or the fog of anxiety is so thick that we feel the sky itself is being torn apart. In these moments of intense emotional activation, the simple instruction to observe can feel inadequate, even impossible. It can feel like being told to simply observe a tidal wave that is about to crash down upon you. In these critical moments, we need more than just perspective. We need an anchor. We need something solid, something real, something to hold on to that can keep us grounded in the present moment until the worst of the storm passes. This anchor, the most reliable and accessible tool we possess, is our own breath. Of all the objects of meditation taught across the world's contemplative traditions, the breath is the most universal. Why? For several simple and profound reasons. First, the breath is always, and only, in the present moment. You cannot take a breath that is in the past. You cannot take a breath that is in the future. To bring your full attention to the sensation of a single inhalation is to forcibly yank your mind out of the imaginary worlds of regret and anxiety, and to plant it firmly in the tangible reality of what is happening right now. When the mind is lost in a catastrophic story about the future, the breath is the lifeline that pulls it back to the safety of the present. Second, the breath is always available to us. It is free. It is portable. From the moment we are born to our very last moment, it is our constant companion. We do not need to go to a special room, sit on a special cushion, or have any special equipment to access this refuge. Our anchor is with us at all times, waiting patiently for our attention. Finally, and most powerfully, the breath is the bridge between our conscious, thinking mind and the vast, unconscious processes of our own body. It is a unique physiological function that can be either automatic or controlled. This gives us a direct, manual lever to influence our own nervous system. To understand this, we need to look at the science of our own reactive storm. When a strong emotion like anger or fear is triggered, our body's sympathetic nervous system is activated. This is the fight, flight, or freeze response, our ancient survival mechanism. Adrenaline and cortisol flood our system. Our heart rate increases, our muscles tense, and our breathing becomes rapid and shallow, moving high up into the chest. This is the body preparing itself for a perceived mortal threat. It is the body's gas pedal, and in a reactive state, our foot is slammed down on it. However, we also have a braking system. This is the parasympathetic nervous system, often called the rest and digest system. Its job is to calm the body down, to signal that the danger has passed. A key component of this braking system is a long, wandering nerve called the vagus nerve, which connects the brain to many of our major organs, including the heart and the diaphragm. And modern science has shown that we can consciously activate this nerve, and thus our entire calming system, through the way we breathe. Slow, deep, diaphragmatic breathing that comes from the belly rather than the chest, and especially breathing that has a slightly longer and more gentle exhalation, directly stimulates the vagus nerve. When we do this, we are sending a powerful, biological signal from our body back up to our brain that says, "It's okay, the threat is over, you can stand down." This is not just a psychological trick of thinking calm thoughts. It is a direct, physiological intervention. It is using the body to calm the mind. There is a powerful analogy for this practice. Imagine you are the captain of a ship caught in a terrifying storm. The waves are mountainous, the wind is howling, and the rain is blindingly intense. An inexperienced sailor would panic. They might run around the deck trying to fight the individual waves. They might curse the wind or collapse in despair. They are reacting to the overwhelming chaos of the storm. But a wise, experienced captain knows better. She knows she cannot control the storm. She cannot command the ocean to be still or the wind to cease. That would be a futile and exhausting battle. Instead, she turns her full attention to the one thing she can control, the rudder of the ship. With her hands firmly on the rudder, she makes small, skillful adjustments, keeping the bow of the ship pointed directly into the oncoming waves. Her focus is not on the overwhelming power of the storm, but on the small, controllable arc of the rudder. By maintaining steady control of the rudder, She doesn't defeat the storm, but she successfully navigates through it, keeping her vessel afloat and on course until the sky clears. In the midst of our emotional storms, our breath is the rudder. To try and fight the overwhelming energy of rage or panic directly is often a losing battle. The wise practice is to turn our attention away from the storm itself and to place it firmly on the steady, controllable rhythm of our breath. By steadying the breath, we steady the mind. By calming the breath, we calm the body. It allows us to navigate through the most intense emotional weather without capsizing. The beauty of this practice is its simplicity. You can use it anywhere, anytime. The next time you feel yourself being hijacked by a reactive emotion, the next time you feel the storm beginning to rise, use that feeling as a trigger to remember this lifeline. The practice is simply this: the 3 conscious breaths. First, stop whatever you are doing and feel your feet on the floor, grounding yourself in the present moment. Then, take the first conscious breath. Follow the entire journey of the inhalation, from the cool feeling of the air entering your nostrils, down your throat, and into your lungs. Feel your chest or belly expand. Just follow that one sensation, as if it is the most interesting thing in the world. Then, take the second conscious breath. This time, as you exhale, make the exhalation just a little bit longer and slower than the inhalation. Imagine that with this out-breath, you are releasing the frantic, chaotic energy of the reaction. Feel the tension in your shoulders begin to soften. Feel your jaw unclench. Finally, take the third conscious breath. As you breathe in and out, simply rest in the sensation. Notice the small space you have created in your mind. Notice the slight calming of your body. In the space of just 3 breaths, something remarkable has happened. You have interrupted the autopilot. You have broken the spell of the emotional hijack. For those few seconds, you were not lost in the angry story about the past or the anxious story about the future. You were simply here, breathing. You have found your anchor. You have grabbed hold of the rudder. The breath is our most faithful friend in the practice of emotional mastery. It is our anchor in the storms of reactivity, our rudder that allows us to navigate the turbulent waters of the mind. It is the simple, profound, and ever-present path back to the sanity and safety of the present moment. It is the act of coming home to ourselves, over and over again. The anchor of the breath brings us back from the turbulent sea of reactivity to the solid shore of the present moment. It calms the storm and clears the mind. Now that we are on solid ground, safe and centered, how do we decide which direction to walk next? We need a tool, not just for stability, but for navigation. We need an inner compass to guide our next action. This is the crucial role of wise and conscious intention. We have found our anchor in the storm. The simple, profound act of returning our attention to the breath provides a lifeline, a way to ground ourselves in the reality of the present moment when the turbulent seas of our emotions threaten to overwhelm us. The breath brings us back to the shore, out of the churning water. It calms our nervous system and clears the fog of reactivity from our minds. But once we are standing on the solid ground of the present moment, with a mind that is relatively calm and clear, we are faced with a choice. What do we do next? Where do we walk from here? An anchor provides stability, but it does not provide direction. For that, we need a different tool. We need a compass. In the practice of emotional mastery, our compass is our conscious intention. In the sacred pause that we have learned to create after we have stopped and taken a breath, the most powerful and transformative question we can ask ourselves is this: what is my deepest intention right now? The answer to this question will determine whether our next action becomes another link in the chain of reactive suffering, or the first step on a path of wise and compassionate response. Our intentions can be divided into 2 families. The first family is born from a reactive mind, fueled by the 3 poisons. These are intentions like the desire to win the argument, the intention to hurt someone back with our words, the intention to prove that we are right and they are wrong, the intention to grasp for pleasure, or the intention to escape from discomfort at any cost. These reactive intentions are narrow, self-centered, and focused on short-term gratification for the ego. They almost always lead to more suffering for ourselves and for others. The second family of intentions is born from a clear mind and an open heart. These are the wise intentions, the skillful desires that the Buddhist tradition calls chanda. This is the sincere wish to act in a way that is beneficial and wholesome. When we ask, "What is my deepest intention?" we are giving this wiser part of ourselves a chance to speak. The answer might be, "My intention is to understand what this other person is truly feeling," or "My intention is to de-escalate this conflict and find a peaceful resolution," or "My intention is to speak the truth with kindness," or "My intention is to act with integrity, regardless of the outcome." By consciously clarifying our intention, we shift from being a passive victim of the situation to being the conscious author of our next moment. We align ourselves with our own highest values. This practice of cultivating wise intention is so central to the Buddhist path that it is the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, right after right view. It is called Samma Sankappa, which can be translated as wise intention or wise resolve. The Buddha taught that wise intention has three aspects. The first is the intention of renunciation, which means the intention to let go of the pull of craving and clinging. The second is the intention of goodwill, the intention to let go of anger, aversion, and ill will. And the third is the intention of harmlessness or compassion, the intention to let go of cruelty and to act with kindness towards all beings, including ourselves. When we pause and ask ourselves, "What is my intention?" we are, in a very practical way, aligning our next action with these three profound principles. We are asking, in this moment, can I choose to let go? Can I choose goodwill? Can I choose to be harmless? To understand the immense power of acting from a clear intention, let us consider the parable of the two archers. Two archers are standing before a target. The first archer has just been insulted by a rival. His mind is a storm of reactivity. It is clouded by the poison of aversion, anger, humiliation, and the burning need for revenge. His intention is not simply to hit the target, but to prove his superiority, to silence his critics. He hastily grabs his bow, nocks an arrow, and fueled by his rage, he pulls back the string with jerky, uncontrolled strength. He glares at the target, but he doesn't truly see it. He sees the face of his rival. He releases the arrow in a blind fury. It flies wild, missing the target completely and lodging uselessly in a nearby tree. He has wasted his energy, revealed his lack of discipline, and accomplished nothing but deepening his own frustration. Now consider the second archer. She approaches the same line, facing the same target, but her inner state is completely different. She begins with a pause. She takes a few slow, conscious breaths, feeling her feet planted firmly on the earth. She quiets her mind, letting go of any thoughts of competition or pride. She then clarifies her single, unifying intention: to send the arrow cleanly and skillfully to the very center of the target. Her mind is calm, open, and focused. Every movement is deliberate and graceful. She raises the bow, draws the string with focused, balanced strength, holds her aim with a steady eye and a quiet mind, and releases the arrow with a gentle and complete letting go. The arrow flies true, straight, and silent, striking the exact center of the target. In our lives, the target is the wisest, most beneficial outcome in any given situation. Our action, our words, our deetsis, the arrow. The parable shows us that an action born from a reactive mind, an action fueled by anger, fear, or ego, is like the first arrow. It will almost always miss its mark, often causing collateral damage in the process. An action that is born from a place of calm presence and guided by a clear, wholesome intention is like the second arrow. It has the greatest possible chance of creating a beneficial result. The quality of our inner state determines the effectiveness of our outer actions. Our intention is the fletching on the arrow that guides it to its target. We can apply this practice in every corner of our lives. Imagine you are in a heated argument with your partner. You feel the surge of reactivity. You stop, you take a breath. You observe the anger in your body. Now, before you proceed, you ask, what is my intention? Is it to win this fight? To prove my point? To have the last word? Or is it to understand my partner, to honor their feelings, and to protect the loving connection between us? By consciously choosing the second set of intentions, the very words you speak next will be transformed. You might say, help me understand what you're feeling. instead of, "You're wrong." Imagine receiving difficult feedback at work. The reactive mind immediately wants to defend itself. But if you can pause, breathe, and set an intention, you can ask, "Is my intention to protect my ego, or is it to find the nugget of truth in this feedback that can help me grow?" The first intention leads to defensiveness and stagnation. The second leads to learning and mastery. This simple act of clarifying intention is the pivot upon which our entire experience turns. It is the rudder that steers us away from the rocky shores of reactivity and toward the calm, open waters of wise response. The sacred pause gives us our freedom back. The anchor of the breath gives us our stability back. And a wise, conscious intention gives us our direction back. It is the compass that guides our actions, ensuring that they are aligned with our deepest values and our highest aspirations. It is the art of ensuring that when we do act, we are not just adding more noise, more conflict, and more suffering to the world, but are instead contributing to understanding, to healing, and to peace. This power to align our actions with our values is the very essence of a skillful and spiritual life. To further illustrate the inherent danger of acting from a reactive intention and the profound self-harm it inevitably causes, we can now turn to a stark and powerful parable from the Buddhist tradition. It is a story that warns us about the serpent of anger that lies coiled within all of us. We have established the supreme importance of our intention. We have seen that in the sacred pause between a trigger and our action, the compass of a wise and conscious intention is what guides us from the muddy waters of reactivity to the clear ground of a skillful response. An action born from a place of calm and goodwill has the power to heal, to connect, and to create peace. An action born from the reactive poisons of anger, fear, or ego, however, has the power to cause immense harm. To illustrate the profound and often hidden self-destructive nature of our own reactivity, the Buddhist tradition offers us not a complex philosophical argument, but a simple, stark, and unforgettable story. For sometimes, a parable can bypass the defenses of the intellect and deliver a truth directly to the heart. This is the story of the man and the frozen serpent. Imagine a man walking home on a bitterly cold winter's day. The wind is sharp, the ground is hard with frost, and a fresh blanket of snow silences the entire landscape. As he walks along a desolate path, his eye is caught by a dark shape against the white snow. He approaches and sees that it is a serpent, frozen, stiff, seemingly dead from the biting cold. Now, this man has a kind and compassionate heart. He knows that serpents can be dangerous, that their nature can be unpredictable, but seeing this creature in such a helpless state, he feels a surge of pity. No being should have to perish in this way, he thinks to himself. All beings deserve warmth. All beings deserve life. His compassion overcoming his fear, the man makes a decision. He gently picks up the frozen, rigid body of the snake. It feels like a cold, scaly rope in his hands. To give it the best chance of survival, he carefully tucks the serpent inside his own thick coat, placing it directly against the warmth of his own skin. He continues his journey home, consciously sharing his own precious body heat with the frozen creature. When he arrives at his small, warm hut, he gently lays the serpent on the soft rug before his hearth. He builds up the fire, and the room begins to glow with a life-giving warmth. Slowly, miraculously, as the heat from the fire penetrates its cold scales, the serpent begins to stir. A flicker of movement, a slow uncoiling. Life is returning. The man watches this with a feeling of quiet satisfaction. His act of compassion has worked. But the serpent, as it fully revives, does not see a savior. It does not understand the man's kindness or the warmth of the hearth. Its brain is small and primitive, its world one of pure, instinctual survival. It awakens in a strange place, near a giant looming figure, and it is flooded with one single powerful impulse: fear. It feels threatened, and in a flash of pure, unthinking, conditioned reaction, it does what a frightened serpent does. It lunges forward and bites the very man who saved its life, injecting him with a lethal dose of venom. As the man lies dying, he looks not with hatred at the snake, but with a deep, sorrowful understanding of its unchangeable, reactive nature. This story is a tragedy, but its purpose is not to make us feel hopeless. Its purpose is to serve as a mirror, showing us a difficult but essential truth about ourselves. In this story, we are both the compassionate man and we are the reactive serpent. The serpent is a perfect metaphor for our own unexamined reactive anger. It is the part of us that lives deep in the oldest, most primitive part of our brain. This reactive energy is not inherently evil. The serpent was not evil. It was simply acting out its deepest conditioning, its most basic program for survival. It responds to a perceived threat with a blind, instantaneous, and deadly force. Our own reactive anger is exactly like this. When we feel triggered, when our ego feels threatened, when our desires are blocked, when an old wound is touched, this serpent of aversion uncoils within us. It doesn't think. It doesn't consider the consequences. It doesn't appreciate the context. It simply strikes, with sharp words, with cold silence, with defensive accusations. It acts from a place of pure, conditioned instinct. The kind man, in this story, represents everything in our lives that gives us warmth, safety, and nourishment. He is our own well-being, our own potential for peace and happiness. He is our most cherished relationships, our loving partner who offers us comfort after a hard day, our patient friend who listens to our troubles without judgment, our children who look to us for safety. The man and his warm hearth are the entire ecosystem of our own flourishing. They are the good things we most need and value in our lives. The serpent's bite, then, is our own reactive outburst. When our partner says something that, because of our own past hurts, we perceive as a threat, and we lash out with cruel, venomous words, we are the serpent, biting the one who is offering us the warmth of their love. When a friend tries to offer us helpful advice, but our ego feels criticized, and we react with cold defensiveness, pushing them away, we are the serpent, attacking the source of our comfort. When we allow a minor daily frustration to spiral into a day-long inner storm of rage and bitterness, poisoning our own peace of mind, we are the serpent, sinking our fangs into our own heart. The ultimate tragedy of the story is that the serpent's reactive, self-protective act is also an act of profound self-destruction. In killing the man, it destroys the very source of the warmth that saved its life. It ensures its own eventual demise. Our reactive anger does the same. With every angry outburst, with every defensive reaction, we systematically poison the relationships that nourish us. We erode trust. We create fear and distance in the people we need to be closest to. We destroy the possibility of connection. We sacrifice the long-term health of our relationships for the short-term, illusory feeling of power that comes from a reactive strike. We are, in effect, burning down our own house to keep ourselves warm for a single night. The path of wisdom is not about trying to kill the serpent within us. We cannot, and should not, try to eliminate our capacity for anger, which can at times be a useful signal. The path is to become so intimately aware of our own inner state that we can feel the serpent begin to stir long before it has a chance to bite. Through mindfulness, we can learn to feel the first flicker of its energy. We notice the heat rising in our chest. We feel the tightening in our stomach. We become aware of the venomous thoughts beginning to form in our mind. And in that moment of seeing, in that sacred pause, we have a choice. We can feel the raw, instinctual energy of the serpent without having to become the serpent. We can hold that powerful energy with a spacious, compassionate awareness. We can let its vibrations move through us without giving it the power to control our words or our actions. We can honor its message. I feel threatened without obeying its blind command to strike. The story of the serpent is a sobering and vital lesson on the path of emotional mastery. It is a reminder that our unexamined reactions, however justified they may feel in the moment, are a profound form of self-sabotage. They are the hot coal we hold in our own hand. They are the second arrow we shoot into our own heart. They are the bite that poisons the very source of our well-being. This story is not a judgment, but an invitation. An invitation to take responsibility for the powerful and sometimes dangerous energies that live within us, and to cultivate the profound wisdom and self-restraint required to ensure they do not destroy the life we are trying so hard to build. The story of the serpent is a stark reminder of how our own unexamined reactions can poison our lives. One of the most common situations where this serpent of anger is awakened is when we feel judged or criticized. To continue our training in emotional mastery, we must now learn how to skillfully respond when we are faced with the words of another that challenge our sense of self. We must learn how to respond to criticism. We have now examined the profound self-harm caused by our own reactive anger, personified by the tragic story of the frozen serpent. We have seen how our unexamined, instinctual reactions can poison the very relationships and circumstances that offer us warmth and safety. There is perhaps no situation in daily life that awakens this serpent of reactivity more quickly or more powerfully than the experience of being criticized. A few simple words from another persona boss, a partner, a friend, even a stranger online, can instantly plunge us into a maelstrom of defensive anger, hot shame, or cold withdrawal. Why do mere words hold such immense power over our inner state? Why can a single sentence hijack our entire nervous system? It is because criticism is rarely perceived as just information. It is perceived by the ego as a direct attack on the carefully constructed story of who we are. It is a threat to our very identity. To respond skillfully to criticism, we must first understand the anatomy of the sting. When someone criticizes our work, our appearance, or our behavior, it hurts so much because it activates several deep layers of our conditioning at once. First, it is a direct threat to the mask of our identity. As we have explored, we all carry a story of ourselves. I am a competent professional. I am a kind person. I am a good partner. Criticism is a direct challenge to the validity of that story. It creates a painful cognitive dissonance, and the ego immediately marshals its defenses to protect its narrative. Second, a present-day criticism often lands directly on a much older, deeper wound. The mild feedback from your manager about being more organized might trigger the same profound feeling of not being good enough that you felt from a demanding parent as a child. In that moment, you are not reacting as a capable adult. You are reacting from the wounded, vulnerable place of a child who feels fundamentally inadequate. The emotional reaction is disproportionate to the event because it carries the weight of a lifetime of pain. Finally, criticism taps into our most primitive survival wiring, the fear of social rejection. For our ancestors, being ostracized from the tribe was a death sentence. That ancient fear is still coded into our DNA. So when we are criticized, a primal alarm can go off, whispering, "I am being judged. I might be cast out. I am not safe." Given these powerful, deeply programmed forces, our instantaneous, unthinking reaction is understandable, but it is not inevitable. The first, most crucial practice when faced with criticism is to use the lifeline we have been developing, the sacred pause. The moment the words land, the moment you feel that familiar, painful jolt, the training is to stop. Do not immediately speak. Do not immediately justify, defend, or attack. Bite your tongue. Freeze your fingers over the keyboard. Create a gap. In that gap, take a breath. Take one full, conscious breath. Feel your feet on the floor. This simple act anchors you in the physical reality of the present moment and begins to calm the fight or flight response. Then, observe. Turn your attention inward and witness the storm. Notice the heat of shame in your face. Notice the tightness in your chest. Notice the angry, defensive stories beginning to churn in your mind. Simply see it all as a passing weather pattern, without judgment. Ah, you can say to yourself, this is defensiveness. This is the feeling of being judged. There is no greater example of this profound, non-reactive mastery than a story from the life of the great Zen master Hakuin. Hakuin was revered throughout Japan for his wisdom and the purity of his life. He lived near a small village where a young woman, who was the daughter of the local food merchant, became pregnant. Under intense pressure from her furious parents to name the father, and in a state of fear and confusion, she named Hakuin. The parents were outraged. They stormed to the temple, burst in while Hakuin was with his students, and screamed at him, denouncing him as a hypocrite and a fraud. They told him he was the father of their daughter's child. Hakuin's reputation was destroyed in an instant. As they hurled accusations at him, Hakuin sat in perfect stillness. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He did not protest his innocence. He simply said, with complete calm, "Is that so?" When the child was born, the parents brought the infant to Hakuin and thrust it into his arms, saying, "This is your child. You must care for it." He took the baby without a word of protest. His life was transformed. The man once revered as a living saint was now seen as a pariah. People who once bowed to him now spat on the ground as he passed. He accepted it all with equanimity. He lovingly cared for the child, begging for milk from neighboring mothers, and ensuring the infant was always warm and fed. A year passed. The young mother, tormented by her conscience, could no longer bear the weight of her lie. She confessed to her parents that the real father was a young man who worked at the fish market. The parents were horrified, consumed with shame and remorse. They rushed back to Hakuin's temple, prostrating themselves on the floor, begging for his forgiveness, and explaining their terrible mistake. They asked for the child back. Hakuin listened to their confession with the same calm he had shown during their accusation. He gently handed the healthy, happy child back to them and said, simply, "Is that so?" Hakuin's response is the pinnacle of emotional mastery. His inner peace was not dependent on his reputation, on the praise or blame of others. He was so free from egoic attachment that he felt no need to defend the story of Hakuin, the pure master. He simply responded to the reality of each moment with quiet, compassionate action. The reality was, "I am being accused." His response, "Is that so?" The new reality was, "A baby is here and needs care." His response was to care for it. The next reality was, "The parents have returned for the child." His response was to give it back. He was not hooked by the drama. He was free. While we may not have Hakuin's level of mastery, we can practice with the same spirit. In the pause we create when criticized, after observing our own inner storm, we can practice the art of mining for gold. The practice is to listen to the criticism with the assumption that, even if the delivery is harsh, unfair, or 99% wrong, there might be a tiny, 1% nugget of truth or valuable feedback hidden within it. Can we listen for that? Can we shift our intention from, "How can I prove them wrong?" to, "Is there anything here I can learn from?" This requires humility, but it is an act of profound strength. We also learn to separate the message from the messenger. We can say to ourselves, "The way they spoke to me was unacceptable and disrespectful, and their point about me needing to be more punctual has some merit." We can take the useful data without having to accept the toxic packaging. After pausing, breathing, observing, and listening, we can then choose our response from a place of wisdom. It might be to thank the person for their perspective, even if we don't agree with it. This immediately de-escalates the conflict. It might be to ask a clarifying question. "When you say my work was sloppy, could you give me a specific example so I can understand better?" This moves the conversation from a vague attack to a concrete, workable issue. Or, if the criticism is clearly just a baseless attack, our wisest response might be a dignified silence, just like Hakuin. We do not need to engage in every battle we are invited to. We can choose to not accept the gift of their negativity. By practicing in this way, we transform the experience of criticism from a painful attack on our self-worth into a valuable opportunity for practice. It becomes a chance to practice mindfulness, to practice patience, to practice humility, and to practice the liberating art of not taking things so personally. We stop being a helpless victim of other people's words and become a curious and resilient student of life. Learning to meet blame and criticism with an open and discerning heart is a profound practice of freedom. It frees us from the tyranny of other people's opinions. But the ego is not only triggered by attack, it is also captivated by flattery, which is the other side of the same coin of judgment. To develop true equanimity, we must also learn to skillfully handle the subtle poison of praise. We must now turn our attention to the art of responding to praise without becoming attached. We have explored the difficult and essential practice of meeting criticism with an open, non-reactive heart. We have learned to use the sacred pause to transform a perceived attack into an opportunity for growth. This is the work of skillfully handling the worldly wind of blame. But to develop true, unshakable equanimity, we must also learn to relate wisely to its seductive and far more pleasant counterpart, the worldly wind of praise. At first, this may seem like a strange task. Praise feels good. Why would we need to learn how to respond to it? We don't see it as a problem, but in the subtle architecture of the mind, praise can be a far more dangerous poison than blame. Blame is a bitter medicine we are reluctant to swallow. Praise is a sweet poison, one we drink down eagerly, unaware of the sickness it can create within us. To understand its hidden dangers, we must look at what happens in the mind when we receive praise. Someone compliments our work, our appearance, or our character. The immediate experience is a pleasant feeling, a warm glow of validation. This is the first arrow, and it is harmless. The problem, as always, begins with the second arrow. The untrained mind takes this pleasant feeling and immediately uses it to build a story, to reinforce the ego. We don't just enjoy the compliment, we cling to it. It becomes evidence for a new, improved identity. My boss praised my report, therefore, I am a brilliant employee. She said I was kind, therefore, I am a saintly person. They liked my art, therefore, I am a creative genius. This act of identifying with the praise is the birth of pride and arrogance, a subtle sense of superiority that creates a wall between ourselves and others. Once this new, inflated identity is established, a new fear is immediately born alongside it, the fear of losing it. Having identified as the brilliant employee, we now live under the immense pressure to be brilliant all the time. Every new project becomes a terrifying test where we must prove our brilliance all over again. We become afraid of asking for help, lest it reveal a crack in our facade. This is the breeding ground for what is known as imposter syndrome and the secret, gnawing fear that we are a fraud and that we will soon be exposed. The praise that was meant to build us up becomes the very source of our anxiety. Furthermore, when we rely on praise for our sense of worth, we have effectively outsourced our well-being. We become dependent on the fickle opinions of others. We begin to subtly, or not so subtly, change our behavior to ensure a steady supply of this drug of validation. We might hesitate to speak an uncomfortable truth for fear of losing approval. We might take on projects we don't believe in simply because we know they will be praised. Our authenticity is sacrificed at the altar of public opinion. Our inner peace becomes incredibly fragile, rising and falling with the passing comments of the people around us. So, how do we learn to receive this warm wind without being blown off course? How do we enjoy the sweetness without ingesting the poison? The practice, just as with criticism, begins with the sacred pause. When someone offers you a genuine compliment, the first step is to simply stop and receive it. Don't immediately deflect it with false modesty. Oh, it was nothing. Don't immediately let it rush to your head to inflate your ego. Just for a moment, pause, take a breath, and let the praise land in your heart, not your head. Feel the kindness and sincerity in the other person's intention. Acknowledge the pleasant, warm sensation that arises in your own body. This is just a pleasant vedana, a feeling tone. Enjoy it simply, as you would enjoy the warmth of the sun on your skin, without needing to build a story around it. The second step is to respond with simple, genuine gratitude. Often, the most skillful response is the least complicated. A heartfelt, "Thank you," or "I really appreciate you saying that," is perfect. It gracefully accepts the gift the other person has offered, without either pushing it away or grasping onto it. It honors their kindness and completes the circle of connection. The third, and most important, step happens after the interaction is over. It is the practice of letting the praise go. We see it as a beautiful, white cloud that has drifted through the vast blue sky of our awareness. We appreciate its shape and its beauty, and then we allow it to continue on its way, to dissolve without leaving a trace. We resist the mind's temptation to keep replaying the compliment over and over, using it as fuel to build up the ego. We let it go, and we return our attention to the simple, unadorned reality of the present moment. There is a story of a great master painter that beautifully illustrates this non-attached way of being. She had labored for years on what was to become her masterpiece. When it was finally unveiled to the world, the acclaim was universal and overwhelming. Critics and patrons alike hailed her as a living legend, a genius of her generation. Her name was celebrated throughout the land. When people praised her, she would smile with genuine warmth, thank them for their kindness, and fully receive their appreciation. One of her young apprentices, awestruck by all the fame, came to her studio the morning after a great celebration in her honor. He expected to find the master basking in her glory, perhaps sitting and staring proudly at her famous painting. Instead, he found her standing in the morning light before a new, completely blank canvas. The celebrated masterpiece had been respectfully moved to the side. Her full, quiet, and loving attention was no longer on the success of the past, but on the empty, unformed potential of the present moment. The student asked her, "Master, how can you be so calm?" The world is calling you a genius. Aren't you tempted to rest on this great achievement? The master picked up a brush and replied, "That painting was a joy to create. The praise is a pleasant warmth, like the morning sun. I am grateful for both. But the sun of yesterday cannot grow the seeds of today. My identity is not the creator of that famous painting. My identity, if I must have one, is simply a painter, and a painter paints." She understood that clinging to her past success would be the surest way to poison her future creativity. Her joy was in the process of creating, not in the result. By returning to the blank canvas, she was keeping her cup empty, always ready to receive the fresh inspiration of the present moment. This is the state we are cultivating. We are learning to anchor our sense of worth not in the shifting sands of external opinion, but in the bedrock of our own inner experience. Our worth comes from the sincerity of our intention, the integrity of our effort, and the compassion we bring to our lives. When we are grounded in this intrinsic, unconditional self-worth, the worldly winds of praise and blame lose their power over us. Praise is experienced as a pleasant warmth, and we can say, "Thank you." Blame or criticism is experienced as a cold wind, and we can learn from it if there is something to be learned. But neither the warmth nor the cold can change the fundamental nature of the mountain. By learning to relate skillfully to both criticism and praise, the two great winds of social judgment, we develop a profound inner balance and a quiet, unshakable confidence. This stability becomes our greatest asset when we must face not just the words of others, but the powerful primal energies that arise from within our own minds. We have learned to work with the outer world of social interaction. We must now turn our attention back to the inner world of raw emotion and learn to respond wisely to one of its most potent and challenging forces, the energy of fear. Having learned to stand with equanimity in the face of the world's praise and blame, we have cultivated a profound inner stability. We have begun to anchor our self-worth, not in the shifting opinions of others, but in the quiet integrity of our own heart. This stability is an essential foundation, for we must now turn our attention from the outer world of social judgment to the primal, powerful energies that arise from deep within our own minds. We now come face to face with one of the oldest and most potent forces in our human evolution, an energy that can paralyze us, motivate us, and often cause us immense suffering. We must now learn to respond, not react, to the energy of fear. Fear, at its root, is a sacred and intelligent survival mechanism. It is the body's alarm system, hardwired into our nervous system to protect us from genuine danger. We do not want to eliminate it. If you are walking in the wilderness and you hear the growl of a bear, fear is the appropriate, life-saving response. It floods your body with adrenaline and cortisol, sharpening your senses and preparing you to fight or flee. This fear is a wise and faithful protector. The problem is that in our complex modern world, this ancient alarm system has become overly sensitive and often faulty. It rings loudly and insistently, not just in the face of a real bear, but in the face of imagined ones. It rings when we have to give a presentation, when we think about our financial future, when we feel a strange sensation in our body, or when we are vulnerable in a new relationship. We can, therefore, make a crucial distinction between two kinds of fear. The first is useful, biological fear. Let us call it fear of the tiger. It is a response to a clear and present danger in your immediate environment. The second is psychological fear, which we more commonly call anxiety. This is fear of a ghost. It is a fear of a thought, a fear of a mental projection, a fear of a future that has not yet happened and may never happen. Our suffering comes from our habit of reacting to the ghost as if it were a real tiger. We experience a fearful thought, and our body's alarm system, unable to distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one, unleashes the same cascade of stress hormones as if we were facing a predator. We are left feeling panicked and overwhelmed by a threat that exists only in our own minds. The practice of emotional mastery is learning to tell the difference between a tiger and a ghost. When the alarm of fear or anxiety begins to ring, our first instinct is often to try and think our way out of it, to reason with it. But this rarely works. When the fight or flight system is engaged, the rational, thinking part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, begins to go offline. You cannot reason with a state of panic. Therefore, the first and most skillful response is not to engage with the fearful thoughts, but to work directly with the body. You must first calm the physiological alarm. A simple and powerful way to do this is to ground yourself in the present moment through your senses. When you feel the panic rising, pause. Name 5 things you can see in the room around you. A lamp, a book, a window, a chair, a rug. Name 4 things you can feel. The texture of your clothes, the solidness of the floor beneath your feet, the warmth of your own hands, the smooth surface of a table. This practice yanks your attention out of the terrifying story in your head and anchors it in the safe, neutral reality of your immediate sensory experience. Alongside this grounding, we use the most powerful tool we have for regulating our nervous system, the breath. As we've learned, a slow, deep breath, with an emphasis on a long and gentle exhalation, is a direct signal to the body's braking system, the parasympathetic nervous system. It is a biological message sent from the body to the brain that says, the immediate threat is over. It is safe to calm down. When you feel fear, the practice is simple. Breathe in slowly for a count of 4, and breathe out even more slowly for a count of 6. Do this several times. You will feel your heart rate begin to slow and the frantic energy begin to subside. This body-first approach is the essential first aid for fear. Once the initial wave of panic has begun to recede, we can then turn to the mind and to a beautiful parable that illustrates how we can work with our psychological fears. A man was walking home through a forest at dusk. The light was fading and the shadows were long and deceptive, playing tricks on his eyes. As he hurried down the path, he suddenly froze in terror. Coiled in the middle of the path just ahead of him was what he was certain was a large, venomous snake poised to strike. His body reacted instantly. Adrenaline surged through him, his heart leaped into his throat, and he jumped back, letting out a cry of alarm. He was in a full-blown panic, reacting to what he perceived as a mortal threat. He stood frozen a few feet away, his heart pounding, his mind racing with images of being bitten. But then, his practice kicked in. He remembered to pause. He took a single shuddering breath. He knew that reacting from this place of terror would not help him. He needed to see clearly. So, he forced himself to stand still and to look closer. He squinted his eyes, letting them adjust to the dim light. He did not simply trust his first, panicked perception. He investigated the reality of the situation. As he looked with a steady, more focused gaze, the terrifying shape began to change. He could see that it was not moving. He could see its texture was not scaly, but fibrous. And then, in a sudden rush of insight, he saw the truth. It was not a snake at all. It was simply a coiled piece of old rope, likely dropped by a woodcutter. In an instant, his panic vanished, replaced by a feeling of profound relief and a little bit of amusement at his own mind. We are all this man in the forest. The neutral, objective reality is the coiled rope bait, is the upcoming presentation, the unanswered email, the ambiguous medical test result. The dim fading light is our mind when it is clouded by the delusion of moha, by fatigue, or by stress. The snake is the catastrophic story our mind projects onto that neutral reality, and our panicked physiological reaction is the suffering we endure. The practice of mindfulness is the practice of pausing, taking a breath, and looking closer at our fears. It is the willingness to question our initial, catastrophic interpretations. Is this really a snake? Or is it just a rope? Is this situation truly a life or death threat? Or is it just a challenging but manageable event? When we investigate our fears with a calm and curious awareness, we often find that the vast majority of them are just harmless coils of rope that our minds have mistaken for serpents. Once we have calmed the body and seen through the mind's scary story, we can then begin to befriend the underlying energy of fear itself. Instead of pushing it away, we can turn toward it with the gentle curiosity of the rain practice. We can ask, what is this fear trying to protect? Fear, even when it is misguided, always has a positive, protective intention. The fear of public speaking is trying to protect you from the pain of shame. The fear of financial ruin is trying to protect you and your family. By acknowledging this positive intention, we can say, "Thank you for trying to keep me safe." This changes our relationship with fear from an adversarial one to a friendly one. Then we can ask, what is the core belief underneath this fear? Often, It is a belief like, I'm not good enough, or I can't handle it. Seeing this belief clearly allows us to question it. Having listened to the fear's message, we can then move from paralysis to wisdom. We can ask, given this situation, what is one skillful action I can take right now? This moves us from being a prisoner of the fear to being its wise and compassionate consultant. Fear is not an enemy to be conquered on the battlefield of the mind. It is a messenger, often misguided and overly dramatic, but a messenger nonetheless. By learning to calm our body's primal alarm, to see through the mind's frightening illusions, and to listen compassionately to the underlying message, we transform our relationship with fear entirely. We move from being its terrified captive to being its calm and discerning friend. Learning to meet our fear with this blend of calm presence and wise inquiry allows us to navigate the uncertainties of life with grace and courage. The same principles apply to fear's seductive twin. While fear is the energy of pushing away what we don't want, desire is the powerful energy of pulling toward what we do want. We must now turn our attention to this other great motivating force and learn to respond to the powerful urges of desire with the same mindful wisdom. We have looked into the heart of fear, learning to meet that powerful energy of aversion and pushing away with a calm presence and a wise, inquiring mind. We now turn to fear's seductive and equally powerful twin, the energy of desire. While fear feels like a threat, desire often arrives feeling like a promise of happiness, of fulfillment, of relief from our inner emptiness. It is the powerful energy of pulling toward. And because it often feels good, because it dangles the prospect of pleasure in front of us, we rarely see it as a problem. We react to the pull of desire just as blindly and automatically as we react to the push of fear, and in doing so, we often walk willingly into its subtle and powerful traps, becoming slaves to our own urges. It is crucial to begin with a distinction. The Buddhist path is not a path of eradicating all desire. To be alive is to have desires. The desire to eat when you are hungry, the desire for shelter and safety, the desire to learn and grow, the desire to be a kind and compassionate person. These are wholesome, skillful, and intelligent desires. In Buddhism, this is known as chanda. It is the aspiration that motivates us to create, to connect, and to awaken. This is not the problem. The problem, the source of our reactivity and suffering, is its unhealthy counterpart, which we have met before, tanha, or clinging, craving. Tanha is the blind, compulsive, and often addictive quality that can attach itself to a desire. It is the voice that says not just, I would like that, but I must have that to be happy. It is the feverish thirst that, when we give in to it, only becomes stronger. Our practice is not to become desireless robots, but to develop the wisdom to distinguish between wholesome aspiration and this addictive, reactive craving. For most of us, our relationship with desire operates as a reactive cycle, an unconscious program that runs without our consent. It begins with a trigger. This could be an external sensory input, seeing an advertisement for a rich dessert, smelling fresh-baked bread, hearing about a friend's exciting new purchase. Or it could be an internal trigger, a feeling of boredom, loneliness, or stress that creates a desire for distraction or comfort. This trigger immediately gives rise to a pleasant feeling tone, a vedana. The mind latches onto this pleasantness, and the poison of craving, tanha, arises. The thought, I want that, becomes, I need that. At this point, the autopilot system takes over. Without any conscious choice, we find ourselves reaching for the cookie, scrolling through social media, pouring the glass of wine. We act on the compulsion. This is followed by a brief moment of pleasure or relief as the craving is temporarily satisfied. But this relief is fleeting. Soon, it is often followed by the negative consequences, the sugar crash, the guilt of overspending, the realization that we've wasted an hour on our phone, the strengthening of an addictive pattern. The underlying dissatisfaction returns, and the cycle is primed to begin all over again. To understand the danger of this blind, reactive pursuit of desire, we can look to the simple, tragic parable of the moth and the flame. Imagine a moth fluttering in the darkness of the night. Its entire being, its simple nervous system, is programmed with a single, overriding instruction: light equals warmth, safety, and direction. Suddenly, it sees a beautiful, dancing flammea candle burning in a window. It is bright, it is warm, it is mesmerizing. The moth feels an irresistible pull. It does not have the mental capacity for a sacred pause. It cannot investigate the nature of the flame. It cannot ask, what is the long-term consequence of flying toward this beautiful light? It can only react. It follows its deepest, most powerful instinct and flies directly into the center of the flame, the very thing it perceived as its ultimate salvation. In an instant, it is consumed, destroyed by its own compulsive, reactive desire. Now, imagine a wise human being sitting by that same fire. The human also feels the attraction of the flame. They are drawn to its warmth, its beauty, its dancing light. But unlike the moth, the human possesses the capacity for conscious awareness. They can feel the pull of desire, the urge to be near the warmth, without being compelled to act on it blindly. They can investigate. They understand the nature of the fire, that it provides comfort and light from a safe distance, but brings pain and destruction upon direct contact. And so, they can make a conscious choice. They choose to sit at a respectful distance, to extend their hands to the warmth, to enjoy the beauty of the light, and to benefit from the fire without being consumed by it. In the drama of our lives, our powerful urges and desires are the flame. When we are living on autopilot, we are the moth. We react to the pull of every desire for food, for alcohol, for validation, for distraction, without any space for wisdom or foresight. We fly directly into the flame, again and again, and we wonder why we keep getting burned. We get burned by addiction, by debt, by unhealthy habits, by shallow relationships, by a life spent chasing fleeting pleasures, while our deeper well-being is neglected. The practice of emotional mastery is the practice of learning to become the wise human. It is the practice of developing the capacity to feel the powerful pull of desire, but to create enough inner space to choose how we will respond to it. How do we do this? We use the same tools we have been cultivating all along. When a strong urge or craving arises, the first step is to stop. Do not immediately act on the impulse. Just for a moment, do nothing. This halts the momentum of the reactive habit. The second step is to take a breath. This calms the agitated energy of wanting and brings you into your body. The third step is to observe. Instead of being lost in the story the desire is telling you, you need this right now. This will solve everything. Drop your attention into the raw, physical sensations of the urge itself. What does craving actually feel like in your body? Is it a hollow feeling in your stomach? A watering in your mouth? A restless, jittery energy in your hands and legs? A tightness in your chest? By observing the urge as just a set of impersonal, physical sensations, you begin to separate from it. It is no longer my unbearable craving. It is just a pattern of energy and tightness. From this place of mindful observation, you can then investigate with wisdom. You can ask yourself, if I follow this urge, what will the result be? What will I feel like in 10 minutes? In an hour? Tomorrow morning? This simple question brings the light of long-term wisdom to bear on a short-term impulsive desire. You are consciously choosing to consider the consequences, something the moth could not do. Finally, having paused, observed, and investigated, you can proceed with a conscious choice. You are no longer a slave to the urge. You are free. You might choose to indulge the desire, but to do so mindfully and with appreciation. You might choose to have one cookie and savor it completely, instead of mindlessly eating the whole box. You might choose to delay the gratification, telling yourself you will check your phone in 10 minutes, by which time the urge may have passed. Or you might see clearly that acting on the desire is unskillful and will lead to regret, and you can make the powerful choice to simply sit with the discomfort of the raw urge, breathing with it, allowing it to be there until it naturally fades away on its own, like a cloud passing through the sky. Our desires are not our enemies. They are powerful, natural energies that are part of our human inheritance. The suffering comes not from the desire itself, but from our blind, compulsive, and reactive relationship to it. By learning to create a space between the urge and our action, we can begin to relate to our desires with wisdom, intelligence, and freedom. We move from being the moth, destined to be consumed by every passing flame, to becoming the wise human who can skillfully and peacefully enjoy the warmth and light of life's many fires without ever getting burned. Learning to skillfully navigate the inner currents of fear and desire is the foundation of emotional mastery. When we are no longer slaves to these powerful urges, we can begin to engage with the world with greater clarity and kindness. Nowhere is this transformation more evident or more impactful than in the words we choose to speak. We must now turn our attention to the profound art of wise communication, of responding rather than reacting with our voice. We have journeyed deep into the internal landscape of the mind, learning to skillfully navigate the powerful currents of fear and desire. We have seen that by creating a sacred pause, we can move from being a slave to these primal urges to becoming their wise and compassionate manager. This inner mastery is the foundation of a peaceful life. Now, we turn our attention to the place where this inner transformation becomes most visible and has the most profound impact on the world around us. We turn our attention to the words we speak. Our speech is one of the most powerful forces we wield. With our words, we can build empires of trust and connection, or we can reduce them to ashes. With our voice, we can offer a healing balm to a wounded heart, or we can inflict a wound that festers for years. For most of us, much of our speech is reactive. Words leap out of our mouths, fueled by the momentary heat of anger, the chill of fear, or the puff of ego, often leaving a trail of regret in their wake. The practice of emotional mastery, therefore, must include the art of wise communication, of responding to the world with our voice, rather than just reacting to it. The Buddhist tradition offers a beautifully complete and practical framework for this. It is called samavaka, or wise speech, and it is the third factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. It is not a set of rigid commandments, but a deep training in mindfulness and compassion applied to communication. Wise speech invites us to become a conscious gatekeeper of our own mouth. In the sacred pause before we speak, especially when we are emotionally triggered, we are encouraged to pass our intended words through a series of 4 profound filters, like sieves that separate the nourishing grain from the harmful chaff. The first filter is truthfulness. The practice is to abstain from false speech, from lying, from exaggeration, and from deception. On a deeper level, it is a commitment to representing reality as clearly and honestly as we can. Before we speak, we pause and ask, is what I am about to say true and accurate to the best of my knowledge? A reactive mind will often bend the truth to its advantageous, small lie to avoid blame, an exaggeration to make a story more dramatic, a distortion to win an argument. A responsive mind values truth over convenience. The second filter is kindness. The practice is to abstain from harsh, abusive, or cruel speech. This includes yelling, insulting, name-calling, and the subtle, cutting remarks of sarcasm. The question we ask is, are the words I am about to use kind and gentle, or are they intended to wound? The reactive mind, when hurt, wants to hurt back. It uses words as weapons. A responsive mind understands that adding more poison to a situation will never lead to healing. The third filter is unity. The practice is to abstain from slanderous or divisive speech. This is speech intended to set one person against another, to create discord and break harmony. It is the essence of malicious gossip. The question here is my intention with these words to connect and heal, or to divide and create conflict? The reactive ego often enjoys the drama and sense of belonging that can come from talking negatively about a third party. A responsive mind values harmony and refuses to participate in speech that damages it. The fourth filter is purposefulness. The practice is to abstain from idle chatter, from pointless gossip, from speech that is merely noise. The question is what I am about to say necessary or beneficial? Will it serve a useful purpose? Our reactive minds often speak simply to fill the silence, to draw attention to ourselves, or to vent our own anxieties. A responsive mind values its own energy and the time of others, choosing silence over speech that serves no wholesome purpose. There is a wonderful story attributed to the Buddha that perfectly illustrates the use of these filters in action. One day, a man came running up to the Buddha, agitated and excited. "Master, Master," he said, "I have just heard something about your good friend that I absolutely must tell you." The Buddha held up his hand, calmly pausing the man's rush of energy. "Before you speak," the Buddha said, Tell me, have you passed what you are about to say through the 3 sieves? The man, confused, asked what he meant. The Buddha explained, the first sieve is the sieve of truth. Are you absolutely certain that what you are about to tell me is true? The man hesitated. Well, no, he said. I didn't see it myself. I just heard it from some others. I see, said the Buddha. So you are not certain that it is true. Let us now try the second sieve, the sieve of goodness. Is what you are about to tell me something good or kind? The man looked down at his feet in embarrassment. No, master. Actually, it is quite the opposite. So, the Buddha said, his voice gentle, you wish to tell me something about my friend that is probably not true, and is certainly not kind. Let us try the third and final sieve, the Buddha continued. The sieve of usefulness. Is what you are about to tell me useful or necessary? Will it benefit me to hear it? Will it benefit my friend? Will it benefit you to tell it? The man shook his head. No, I suppose not. The Buddha then smiled. So, if what you wish to say is not certainly true, not kind, and not useful, then why speak it at all? It is far better to let it rest, and not burden yourself or others with it. Is before, these 3 sieves, truth, kindness, and usefulness are the powerful gatekeepers we can install in our own minds. Let's see how they work in our daily lives. You are at work, and a group of colleagues is gathered in the break room, complaining and gossiping about another team member who isn't present. The reactive mind is drawn to the drama. It enjoys the sense of shared intimacy that comes from a common enemy. It wants to join in, to add its own story, its own judgment. But you have learned to pause. In that pause, you run your intended words through the sieves. Is the story you are about to add certainly true? Probably not. It's second-hand. Is it kind? Absolutely not. Is it useful? No. It only creates a more toxic and mistrustful work environment. Seeing this with clarity, you make a conscious choice. Your wise response is to not participate. You might politely change the subject, or simply say, I have to get back to my desk, and walk away. You have protected yourself and everyone else from the poison of unskillful speech. Consider a conflict with your partner. They say something that triggers your old wound of not feeling appreciated. The serpent of anger awakens, and your reactive impulse is to lash out with a harsh, sweeping generalization. You never appreciate anything I do, but you have trained yourself to pause. You feel the heat of anger. You anchor yourself with a breath, and you apply the filter. Is it true that they never appreciate you? A moment's honest reflection shows that this is an exaggeration. It is not true. Is it kind? Clearly not. Is it useful? No. It is a statement guaranteed to escalate the conflict and put your partner on the defensive. Having seen this, you choose a different response. You choose to speak from your own vulnerable truth, using an I statement. You might say, when you said that, it made me feel really hurt and unappreciated. This statement is true. It is your authentic feeling. It is kind. It is not an attack. And it is useful. It invites genuine communication about the real issue. In our digital age, the opportunities for reactive speech are endless. We see a headline or a comment that enrages us, and our fingers itch to type a furious retort. The practice is the same. Pause. Breathe. Filter. Is my comment based on a full understanding of the truth, or just a reactive headline? Is it kind, or just adding more hatred to an already polarized world? Is it useful, or am I just venting my own rage into the void? Very often, we will find that the wisest, most powerful, and most peace-protecting response is to simply close the laptop and walk away. This leads us to a crucial aspect of wise speech, the power of noble silence. In a world drowning in noise, opinion, and reactivity, the conscious choice to remain silent is often the most eloquent and compassionate response of all. It is a refusal to add more fuel to the fire. It is a statement of inner strength and self-possession. Wise speech is the practice of mindfulness in action. It is the art of transforming our voice from a reactive weapon into a responsive instrument of peace. By pausing, even for a single breath, and filtering our words through the sieves of truth, kindness, and usefulness, we protect ourselves from regret, and we protect others from harm. We begin to create a world around us that is characterized by clarity, trust, and connection, one conscious conversation at a time. This practice of wise speech is not merely a communication technique, it is a profound expression of our inner state. The choice to speak kindly, to refrain from gossip, to consider the impact of our words, naturally arises from a heart that has been cultivated in compassion. To strengthen our ability to respond wisely with our words and actions, we must now turn our attention to the very lens through which we view others, the transformative lens of compassion. We have explored the profound art of wise speech, learning to use the sacred pause to filter our words through the sieves of truth, kindness, and usefulness. This practice of transforming our communication from a reactive weapon into a responsive instrument of peace is not merely a surface-level technique. The choice to speak kindly, the intention to heal rather than harm, arises naturally from a heart that has been cultivated in a certain way. To truly master our responses to the world, we must now turn our attention to the very lens through which we view other people. We must learn to see the world, and everyone in it, through the transformative lens of compassion. Our default mode of interpretation, especially when faced with someone else's difficult or harmful behavior, is to react with judgment. When another driver cuts us off in traffic, our immediate thought is, "What a terrible, selfish person." When a colleague fails to meet a deadline, we think, "They are so lazy and incompetent." When someone speaks to us with anger, we conclude, "They are a hostile, unkind human being." We take a single action and we extrapolate it into a fixed, negative judgment of their entire character. This interpretation, this story we tell ourselves about the other person being inherently bad, is what gives our own reactive anger and defensiveness its fuel and its sense of righteousness. We feel justified in our anger because we have judged them to be in the wrong. But this entire way of seeing is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what truly motivates human behavior. The Buddhist path offers us a different lens through which to see. This is the lens of compassion, or karuna. In the Buddhist understanding, compassion is not a feeling of sentimental pity or a condescending sympathy for someone we see as beneath us. It is something far more visceral and profound. It is the trembling of the heart in the face of suffering. It is the sincere, active wish for a being any being to be free from their pain. When we learn to look at others through this lens, their difficult behavior is transformed. Instead of seeing a bad person, we begin to see a suffering person. This shift in perception is the key to unlocking a wise and skillful response. The practice is to pause when faced with another's unskillful action and to ask a revolutionary question. What must this person be suffering from to be acting in this way? This question completely changes the entire dynamic of the encounter. It shifts us from a position of judgment to one of curiosity. It moves us from the role of an adversary to the role of a compassionate diagnostician. We begin to see, with wisdom, that people's harmful actions almost always spring from their own inner pain. Their anger is likely a mask for their own fear or hurt. Their arrogance is almost certainly a defense against a deep-seated feeling of inadequacy. Their carelessness is a symptom of a mind lost in its own distracted turmoil. We begin to recognize their behavior as the product of their own untended garden, their own mind being run by the three poisons of greed, aversion, and delusion. Seeing this, how can our response be one of simple condemnation? There is a powerful modern story that illustrates this transformative shift with heartbreaking clarity. A man was riding a subway car in New York City. The car was quiet, the atmosphere peaceful, as people read their books or rested on their evening commute. At one stop, a man got on with several young children. As soon as the doors closed, the children began to run wild. They were shouting, throwing things, grabbing at other passengers' newspapers. The entire car was thrown into chaos, and the father did nothing. He just sat on the bench, closed his eyes, and seemed to be in another world, completely oblivious to the mayhem his children were causing. The other passengers became visibly annoyed, then angry. They exchanged looks of disbelief. They muttered under their breath about his terrible parenting, his lack of respect for others. The tension in the car became thick with collective judgment. Finally, one man, unable to tolerate it any longer, stood up, walked over to the father, and said sternly, "Sir, your children are disturbing everyone in this car. Can't you do something to control them?" The father slowly opened his eyes, as if coming out of a deep fog. He looked at the man and his voice was soft, hollow, and broken. He said, Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. We just came from the hospital. Their mother, my wife, she died about an hour ago. I guess I don't know what to think. And I guess they don't know how to handle it either. In that instant, the entire reality of the subway car was transformed. The angry passenger's judgment and condemnation evaporated. It was replaced by a tidal wave of shock, of shame for his own harshness, and then a profound, gut-wrenching compassion. The children's behavior had not changed. The external event was exactly the same, but the story about the event, the understanding of the suffering that was fueling it, had changed completely. The desire to condemn was replaced by an overwhelming desire to help. This story reveals a fundamental truth about our lives. We are constantly reacting to the surface behavior of others, without any knowledge of the invisible battles they are fighting, the silent grief they are carrying, the deep suffering that is driving their actions. The practice of compassion is the choice to assume there is a story of suffering we cannot see. It is the choice to respond to the father in the hospital, not just the misbehaving children on the train. This compassionate lens is not something we can simply switch on by force of will. It must be cultivated. This is the role of the formal practice of metta, or loving kindness, which we have explored. The daily practice of sincerely wishing well for ourselves, for our loved ones, for neutral people, and even for difficult people, is like tilling and watering the soil of our own heart. It makes the heart soft, receptive, and less prone to the hard, dry weeds of judgment. A heart that has been regularly bathed in the warmth of metta has a different default setting. When the first arrow of another's unskillful action strikes, a hardened heart immediately reaches for the second arrow of retaliation. A heart softened by metta, however, has a different first instinct. Its instinct might be a silent wish. May you be well. May you be free from the anger that is causing you to speak this way. This response is a spiritual superpower. It not only protects our own inner peace from being hijacked, but it breaks the cycle of reactive harm. It refuses to continue the chain of suffering. Compassion, therefore, is not a weak or sentimental feeling. It is a form of profound intelligence. It is the ability to see beneath the surface of things to the deeper reality of our shared human condition, that all beings want to be happy, and all beings want to be free from suffering. And it is the recognition that most harmful behavior is a tragic, misguided, and ultimately failed attempt to achieve those two goals. When we truly see this, reacting with simple anger or judgment no longer makes any sense. It would be like a doctor getting angry at a patient for having the symptoms of their disease. The only sane, wise, and helpful response is one that is grounded in a desire to heal the underlying cause of the suffering. Cultivating this compassionate lens allows us to meet even the most challenging human behavior with a measure of grace and understanding. It shifts our default from judgment to curiosity, from condemnation to care. To see how this powerful inner shift translates into simple, real-world action, we can now turn to a very ordinary story that illustrates this choice perfectly. The story of an overturned cart on the side of the road. We have now arrived at the powerful and transformative practice of seeing the world through the lens of compassion. We have learned that by shifting our perspective, by choosing to see the suffering behind another person's unskillful actions, rather than simply judging the action itself, we can fundamentally alter our own reactive patterns. This inner shift from judgment to compassionate curiosity is the very heart of a wise and peaceful life. But how does this inner transformation translate into our actions in the world? How does it change the way we actually show up for the messy, imperfect, and often challenging moments of our daily existence? To explore this, we turn from inner analysis to a simple story of outer action, a parable of a common, everyday misfortune that reveals a profound choice point we all face. This is the story of the overturned cart. Imagine a person walking along a quiet country road on a beautiful afternoon. The sun is warm, a gentle breeze is blowing, and they are feeling a rare and welcome sense of peace. As they round a bend in the road, their peaceful walk is interrupted. Ahead of them is a scene of disarray. A small wooden cart, pulled by a donkey, has hit a rut and overturned. Its contents baskets overflowing with bright red apple shave spilled out and are scattered across the road. The owner of the cart, an elderly farmer, stands beside the mess, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of weary despair. He stares at the scattered apples, the overturned cart, and the stubborn donkey, and he does not know where to even begin. Now, let us imagine a first walker who comes upon this scene. This person is living in the default state of a reactive mind, a mind conditioned by judgment and impatience. Their immediate, unpaused thought process goes something like this. Look at this mess. This old man must have been daydreaming or going too fast. What a careless fool. Now the whole road is blocked. I'm in a hurry and this is going to make me late. This is what happens when people aren't paying attention. This first walker might let out an audible sigh of frustration, scowl at the old farmer, and then carefully, with an air of annoyance and superiority, step around the scattered apples and continue on their way, their own peaceful afternoon now soured by a feeling of irritation and self-righteousness. This person has encountered a moment of suffering in the world and, through their reaction, has added their own small drop of negativity and judgment to the situation. They have made the world and their own mind a slightly colder place. Now let us imagine a second walker approaching the very same scene just a few moments later. This person is someone who has been practicing the path we have been exploring. They too see the overturned cart and the scattered apples, and perhaps they feel an initial, fleeting flicker of annoyance at the inconvenience the first arrow. But then, their practice kicks in. They stop. They don't immediately react. They take a breath, anchoring themselves in the present moment, and they observe. But they don't just observe the mess on the road, they observe the whole scene. They see the elderly farmer's slumped shoulders. They see the exhaustion and despair on his face. They see the situation not through the lens of personal inconvenience, but through the lens of compassion. They do not see an incompetent fool who is blocking their path. They see a fellow human being who is struggling, who is suffering. This compassionate seeing instantly changes their inner landscape. Their intention is no longer to get past the obstacle as quickly as possible. Their intention, born of this compassionate understanding, shifts to, how can I be helpful? Having clarified this wise intention, they proceed. They walk up to the old farmer, make eye contact, and say with a gentle voice, "That looks like a difficult situation. Let me help you." The old farmer looks up, surprised by the kindness in their voice. Together, without another word, they begin the work. They stoop down and start gathering the apples, carefully placing the bruised ones in a separate basket. Once the apples are collected, they put their shoulders to the heavy cart, and, with a shared rhythm of effort, they manage to heave its wheels out of the muddy ditch and set it upright. The work that seemed overwhelming for one person becomes manageable for two. The farmer, his face now transformed from despair to deep gratitude, thanks the walker profusely and insists they take a basket of the finest apples for their trouble. The second walker continues on their way, their own heart now filled with a quiet, warm joy, the joy of connection, the joy of helpfulness. They have encountered a moment of suffering in the world, and through their conscious, compassionate response, they have alleviated it, leaving the world and their own mind a slightly warmer and more beautiful place. This simple story reveals the fundamental choice we face in almost every moment of our lives. The overturned carts of life are everywhere. Our colleague at work who is stressed and snaps at us in a meeting that is an overturned cart. The reactive mind of the first walker immediately judges them. What a rude person. They have no right to talk to me like that. The responsive mind of the second walker pauses, looks through the lens of compassion, and wonders, they must be under a lot of pressure to be acting this way. I wonder if they're okay. Our child who makes a mess or breaks something valuable that is an overturned cart. The reactive mind blames and scolds. The responsive mind sees the child's own fear and remorse and focuses first on connection and then on solving the problem together. Even our own mistakes are overturned carts. When we fail at something, the reactive mind of the first walker berates us with an inner voice of harsh self-judgment. You are so stupid. You always mess things up. The responsive mind of the second walker sees our own suffering and offers self-compassion, asking gently, "Okay, that didn't work. What can we learn from this? How can I help myself clean up this mess with kindness?" In every situation, we have this choice. We can react with the coldness of judgment, which always creates more separation and suffering. Or we can respond with the warmth of compassion, which always leads to connection and healing. The first walker saw the situation as being all about him, his schedule, his inconvenience, his judgment. The second walker saw the situation as being about the other person, their struggle, their suffering, their need. This shift from a self-centered perspective to an other-centered, compassionate perspective is the entire art of wise response. The choice to help with the overturned cart is not just a choice about an external action. It is a choice that cultivates a specific, powerful quality of heart. When we repeatedly choose compassion over condemnation, presence over judgment, and helpfulness over annoyance, we begin to develop a profound inner stability, a balance that is not so easily shaken by the ups and downs of life. This unshakable balance has a name. It is equanimity, and it is the calm, beating heart of a mind that has mastered the art of response. We have walked a long and winding path on our journey of emotional mastery. We have learned to respond with wisdom to the internal storms of fear and desire, and to the external triggers of criticism, praise, and the suffering of others. We have cultivated mindfulness as our light, the breath as our anchor, intention as our compass, and compassion as our lens. The question now arises, what is the result of all this practice? When we consistently choose to respond rather than react, what is the quality of heart and mind that we are cultivating? The fruit that grows from this dedicated practice is a state of profound inner balance, a serene and spacious heart that is the pinnacle of emotional freedom. In the Buddhist tradition, this unshakable peace is known as upekkha, or equanimity. Of all the concepts we have explored, equanimity is perhaps the most easily misunderstood, especially by the Western mind. Hearing the word, we might imagine a state of cold, detached indifference, a kind of emotionless, stony stoicism, where nothing affects us because we have walled off our heart from the world. We might picture someone who simply doesn't care. This is not equanimity. In fact, it is its opposite. Indifference is a state of disconnection, born from the poison of aversion. It is the mind saying, I don't want to feel the pain of the world, so I will shut down and refuse to engage. It is a state rooted in fear. It feels cold, numb, and profoundly isolating. Equanimity is a state of profound and radical connection. It is the capacity to be fully engaged with life, to feel everything with an open and sensitive heart, but to do so without being knocked off our center. It is not about feeling less. It is about feeling everything with a wise and spacious container that can hold it all without being overwhelmed. If indifference is like turning off the sound because you don't like the song, equanimity is like being a master sound engineer who can hear every single note in the complex symphony of life, the beautiful melodies of joy, and the jarring, dissonant chords of sorrow with perfect clarity, balance, and an appreciation for the whole composition. Equanimity is born not of aversion, but of deep wisdom. It is the calm, steady heart that understands the truth of impermanence, anicca. It knows that pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame are all temporary, passing phenomena, like weather changing in the sky. Because it does not cling to the pleasant or push away the unpleasant, it can meet both with a balanced and peaceful mind. To understand this state, we can use two powerful metaphors. First, imagine your mind is a great, majestic mountain. Its base is rooted deep in the earth, and its peak touches the clouds. This mountain is constantly subjected to the changing conditions of the world, what Buddhism calls the 8 worldly winds. On a beautiful day, the warm, gentle wind of praise blows against it. People admire its beauty and strength. On another day, the harsh, biting wind of blame blows. People criticize its jagged peaks or the shadows it casts. A storm brings the wind of pain, lashing it with rain and lightning. A change in season brings the loss of its green summer coat. Through all of this, the praise and blame, the gain and loss, the pleasure and pain, the fame and disrepute, the mountain remains unmoved. It does not grow taller when praised, or shrink when blamed. It does not get angry at the storm or cling to the sunshine. It simply sits in its own immense, solid, and quiet dignity, allowing all the weather of the world to happen around it without being fundamentally changed by it. To cultivate equanimity is to develop this mountain-like stability in our own hearts. But this does not mean we become an unfeeling rock. This leads us to our second metaphor, the eye of a hurricane. A hurricane is one of the most powerful and chaotic forces in nature. On its outer edges, the winds are violent and destructive, tearing everything apart. This is the drama and chaos of the world. the ups and downs of our lives. But at the very center of this swirling maelstrom is a place of perfect calm, of profound stillness. This is the eye of the storm. From this place of quiet, you can see the storm raging all around you with absolute clarity. But you are not in it. You are not being thrown about by its violent energy. To practice equanimity is to learn how to find and abide in this peaceful center within ourselves, even when the storms of life are raging around us. It is the ability to remain in the eye of our own hurricane. How does this state of profound balance arise? It is the natural resting state of a mind that has been purified of the poisons of greed and aversion. Think of the mind as a pendulum. The poison of greed or craving is constantly pulling the pendulum to one side. We are pulled toward pleasure, praise, and gain, creating a state of agitated wanting. The poison of aversion or hatred is constantly pushing the pendulum to the other side. We are pushed away from pain, blame, and loss, creating a state of agitated resistance. A reactive life is one spent swinging wildly back and forth between these two extremes, constantly pulled and pushed by our likes and dislikes. Equanimity is what happens when we stop pulling and pushing. As we practice letting go of our craving for pleasant experiences and letting go of our resistance to unpleasant ones, the pendulum naturally, on its own, begins to slow down. Its wild swings become smaller and smaller until finally it comes to rest at its natural center point. This still, silent, perfectly balanced center is equanimity. It is not a state we have to create or force. It is the mind's innate nature, revealed when we stop agitating it with our own reactivity. It is the peace that is already there, beneath the noise of our wanting and not wanting. When we can respond to life from this place of equanimity, our actions take on a new quality of wisdom and effectiveness. We are no longer making decisions from a place of fear, trying to avoid a loss, or from a place of greed, trying to secure a gain. We are able to see the situation with a clear, unbiased perspective, like the general on the hill observing the whole battlefield. We can then choose the course of action that is truly the most beneficial in the long run, not just the one that satisfies our immediate craving or soothes our immediate fear. We become more patient, more resilient, and far more compassionate, because when we are not consumed by our own drama, we have so much more space in our hearts to be present for the drama of others. This profound state of equanimity does not render us passive or uncaring. It is not a retreat from the world's problems. In fact, it is the very foundation from which the most effective and sustainable action is born. It ensures that our actions are guided by clarity, not by chaos, by wisdom, not by reactivity. But how does this calm, balanced heart respond when faced with true injustice and harm in the world? How do we engage with the world's suffering without losing our own peace? This leads us to the crucial practice of fierce compassion. We have journeyed to the calm, spacious center of the awakened heart, to the state of profound balance known as equanimity. We have learned to sit like a mountain, allowing the worldly winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, to blow past us without being uprooted. We have learned to find the eye of the storm within ourselves. But as we stand in this place of newfound peace, a vital and urgent question arises, one that tests the very foundation of our practice. What happens when the winds are not just blowing against us, but are causing grievous harm to others? What is the wise response when we witness true injustice, oppression, or violence in the world? Is this path of non-reactivity simply a retreat into a state of passive acceptance? Are we to simply observe suffering with a detached smile and do nothing? The answer, from the very heart of the Buddhist tradition, is a clear, resounding, and unequivocal number. A calm mind is not a passive mind. A compassionate heart is not an indifferent one. In fact, the state of equanimity is the very foundation from which the most powerful, effective, and sustainable action is born. To understand this, we must first look honestly at the limitations of our usual, reactive response to injustice. When we see something that is wrong, our natural, untrained reaction is often one of righteous, burning anger. This anger can be a powerful motivator. It is a signal from our conscience that a boundary has been crossed, that harm is being done. It can give us the initial surge of energy to stand up and say, "This is not right." But activism that is fueled only by reactive anger has serious and predictable limitations. First, rage clouds our judgment. When we are intoxicated by anger, We cannot see the situation with clarity. We are prone to making strategic errors, to saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and to acting from a place of pure emotion rather than wise, discerning intelligence. We may win a small battle, but we often lose the larger war because our actions are not guided by a clear and steady mind. Second, an activism based on anger leads to rapid burnout. Anger and hatred are incredibly high-cost emotions. They consume enormous amounts of our physical, mental, and emotional energy. To live in a constant state of outrage is to court exhaustion, despair, and a deep, corrosive cynicism. We cannot sustain our efforts for the long haul if our only fuel is the toxic energy of rage. Finally, when we act from anger, we tend to dehumanize our opponents. We see them not as complex human beings caught in their own webs of suffering and delusion, but as evil, irredeemable monsters. This us versus them mentality, while viscerally satisfying, closes the door to any possibility of dialogue, reconciliation, or change of heart. It simply perpetuates the cycle of hatred and division, ensuring that even if we win, the seeds of the next conflict have already been sown. The path of wise response offers a third way, an alternative to both passive resignation and reactive rage. It is the path of fierce compassion. To understand this, let us imagine a mother watching her young toddler play happily in a park. Her heart is filled with a soft, gentle, loving kindness. Suddenly, the child, chasing after a ball, darts away from her and runs directly into a busy street, right into the path of an oncoming car. What is the mother's response? It is instantaneous, powerful, and utterly fierce. There is no hesitation. She does not pause to consider the driver's feelings. She sprints, her face a mask of absolute determination, and snatches her child from the path of danger, perhaps shouting, "No," in a voice so sharp and loud it startles everyone around. Her action is not gentle, it is not soft, it is forceful and uncompromising. But now, let us examine the motivation, the root intention, behind her fierce action. Was she motivated by hatred for her child? Did she act out of a desire to punish him for being disobedient? Of course not. Her entire action, from start to finish, was born from a place of pure, unconditional, and all-encompassing love. Her fierceness was the direct expression of her profound compassion, her absolute commitment to protecting a life and preventing harm. The force of her response was a measure of her love. This is the essence of fierce compassion. It is the understanding that sometimes the most compassionate act is not a gentle word or a patient smile. Sometimes, compassion requires us to be strong, to be courageous, to draw a firm line, and to act decisively to protect the vulnerable and prevent harm from occurring. But the energy behind the action is always love, always the wish to heal, never hatred or the wish to destroy. When we act from a place of equanimity and fierce compassion, our engagement with the world's injustices is transformed. Because our minds are calm, we can see the situation with greater clarity. We can see the suffering of the victims, but we can also see the complex causes and conditions that led the perpetrators to act as they did. This does not mean we excuse their actions, but it means we can act strategically, targeting the root causes of the problem, rather than just lashing out at the symptoms. Because we are not burning ourselves out with the high-cost fuel of rage, we can remain engaged for the long run. Our activism is sustainable, nourished by the deep well of our compassion, rather than the fleeting fire of our anger. We can face setbacks and disappointments without falling into despair, because our commitment is to the path of compassion itself, not to a specific, immediate victory. And most profoundly, we protect our own hearts. We can fight with all our strength against a harmful system, an unjust policy, or a destructive action, without letting hatred for the people caught in that system poison our own minds. We can maintain the radical discipline of seeing the humanity, even in our opponents, recognizing them as beings also trapped by the poisons of greed, aversion, and delusion. This is the path walked by our greatest exemplars of social change. Martin Luther King Jr. fought with immense strength and unwavering determination against the profound injustice of racial segregation, but he did so from a foundation of Christian love and a radical commitment to non-violence, even toward those who wished him harm. The Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh was a tireless advocate for peace during the Vietnam War, yet he never ceased to see the American soldiers, the Viet Cong, and the Vietnamese villagers as all being equal victims of the insanity of war. His fierce opposition to the war was rooted in his deep practice of mindfulness and a boundless compassion for the suffering of all sides. These figures teach us that the most powerful response to the world's suffering is not a choice between a passive heart and an angry fist. It is the combination of a deeply compassionate heart and a strong, skillful hand. It is the marriage of the wisdom that sees the interconnectedness of all beings and the courage to act on that understanding. This is not easy. It requires immense practice and inner cultivation. But it is the path that holds the only true promise of not just winning a single battle, but of helping to heal the world. This ability to act with fierce compassion, to engage with the world's greatest challenges from a place of unshakable inner peace, is a sign of a truly mature practice. It reflects a mind that has been fundamentally rewired through diligent training. It is a mind that is no longer easily provoked, no longer a puppet to be played by external events. It is a mind that has become, in a sense, unhackable. We have now come to the culmination of our practice. We have learned to meet injustice with fierce compassion, to tend to the world's overturned carts with a helpful hand, and to find the unshakable peace of equanimity in the eye of life's storms. As we consistently choose the path of wise response over mindless reaction, a profound and fundamental shift begins to occur in the very texture of our being. Our mind, once a chaotic battlefield, constantly being overrun by external events, begins to transform into a calm and secure inner sanctuary. We become less easily provoked, less susceptible to emotional hijacking. We become, in a very real sense, unhackable. To understand this transformation, it is helpful to use a modern metaphor. Imagine that the untrained reactive mind is like an old computer with an outdated operating system. It has no firewall. Its antivirus software has not been updated in years. Its code is filled with bugs and security vulnerabilities left over from its initial programming. These are our sankharas, our conditioned, habitual patterns. This computer is connected to the vast chaotic network of the internet, which is the world. Any malicious link clicked, a criticism, any deceptive pop-up ad, a temptation, any email attachment from an unknown source, an unexpected event, can instantly infect the entire system. Viruses of anger, anxiety, and despair run rampant, slowing the system down, causing it to crash, and corrupting its most important files. This computer is completely at the mercy of its environment. It is vulnerable. It is, in every sense of the word, hackable. For most of us, this is the state in which we live our lives. The entire path of emotional mastery we have been exploring is a process of performing a deep and thorough security upgrade on this inner computer. Each practice we have learned is like installing a specific piece of powerful state-of-the-art software. The practice of mindfulness, especially the sacred pause, is our real-time virus scanner and firewall. When a trigger event occurs, the malicious email arriving in our inbox, the firewall of mindfulness immediately detects it. It creates a pop-up window in our awareness that says, "Warning, a potentially harmful stimulus has been detected. Do you wish to proceed?" This is the sacred pause. It gives us the crucial moment to examine the stimulus before automatically running the program of reactivity. We can see the virus of anger for what it is and choose to delete it before it infects our system. The practice of compassion, both for ourselves and others, is like upgrading our pattern recognition software. An untrained mind sees an attack from another person and labels it simply as malicious code, reacting with defensive hostility. A mind trained in compassion has a more sophisticated analysis. It sees the incoming attack and recognizes it not just as malice, but as a symptom of a virus in the other person's system. It thinks, this person is acting out of their own suffering, their own fear, their own delusion. Seeing this, our system doesn't need to react defensively. It sees that the attack is not truly personal. Compassion allows the insult to be quarantined, observed with understanding, rather than allowing it to corrupt our own inner peace. And finally, the cultivation of wisdom, the deep, experiential understanding of impermanence, anicca, and no-self, anatta-ease, the ultimate operating system upgrade. It is like rebuilding the entire system from the ground up on a new, secure architecture. When we truly understand that there is no solid, permanent self to defend, the viruses have nothing to latch onto. An insult, which is a virus designed to attack the file labeled "My Ego," finds that the file is empty. It has no target. A loss, which is a virus designed to attack our sense of permanent security, finds that we have already embraced the truth of impermanence. The attack has no power. We are no longer trying to protect a fragile, vulnerable self, because we have discovered that our true nature is the spacious, open, and invulnerable awareness in which all things arise and pass away. We can also think of this transformation with a simpler, more organic metaphor, the parable of the well-tended house. The untrained mind is like a rundown, dilapidated house. The windows are broken, the doors hang loose on their hinges, and there are holes in the roof. The person living inside is in a state of constant distress. Every cold wind of criticism blows right through the house, chilling them to the bone. Every stray animal of desire can wander in and make a mess. Every loud, frightening noise from the street of life feels as though it is happening right inside their living room. They have no peace, no security, no sanctuary. They are completely exposed to the elements. The practice of responding, not reacting, is the slow, patient, and loving work of repairing this house. Each time we practice mindfulness, we are mending a broken window pane. Each time we respond with compassion instead of judgment, we are fixing the lock on the door. Each time we see through an old, limiting belief, we are patching a hole in the roof. Over time, the house becomes a place of safety and refuge. The wind of blame still howls outside, but it can no longer penetrate the walls. The stray cat of craving might scratch at the door, but it cannot enter unless the owner consciously chooses to let it in. The chaotic noises of the world are still there, but they are heard as distant sounds, not as personal invasions. The owner of this well-tended house is not isolated from the world. They are simply no longer a victim of it. They have the freedom to choose when to open the door to welcome a guest, when to open a window to let in a fresh breeze, and when to sit quietly inside, enjoying the peace of their own sanctuary while a storm rages outside. This is the subjective experience of a mind that is becoming unhackable. It is not that the triggers of life disappear. The world will never stop presenting us with difficult people, frustrating situations, and painful events. The rude comment is still said. The project at work still fails. The loss still occurs. The difference is that these external events no longer find a hook within us. The critical remark arrives, but it finds no defensive ego to latch onto, so it falls harmlessly to the ground. The urge for an addictive substance arises, but it finds no compulsive habit pattern to activate, so it simply dissolves like a cloud. The feeling of fear appears, but it finds a mind that knows how to greet it with calm and kindness, so it passes through without creating a panic. This is the essence of true inner strength and security. It is a peace that is not dependent on the world being peaceful. It is a freedom that is not dependent on our circumstances being perfect. It is the profound resilience of a mind that has, through patient practice, become a safe and welcoming home for itself. This unhackable mind, this state of profound inner security and peace, is not a superpower reserved for saints and sages. It is the natural result of the diligent practice of choosing response over reaction. It is the embodiment of a life lived with mindful intention. This leads us to the final, culminating insight of our entire journey, a redefinition of freedom itself. Freedom is not a condition of our life, but a quality of our response. We have arrived at the final stage of our journey into the heart of emotional mastery. We began with the painful recognition of a reactive life, a life lived as a puppet on strings, jerked about by the chaotic pulls of our own unexamined emotions and the unpredictable events of the world. We have traveled far since then. We have brought the light of awareness to the second arrow we shoot into ourselves, to the deep grooves of our conditioning, and to the three poisons of greed, aversion, and delusion that fuel our suffering. We have learned to find refuge in the sacred pause, to anchor ourselves with the breath, to navigate with the compass of wise intention, and to see the world through the transformative lens of compassion. We have explored how to respond with wisdom to all of life's challenges, from criticism and praise to fear, desire, and even great injustice. We now stand at the culmination of this path, ready to integrate its final and most empowering insight, a radical redefinition of freedom itself. In our culture, we are taught to think of freedom as something external. It is the freedom from constraints, the ability to do whatever we want. to go wherever we want, to have whatever we want. It is the freedom of unlimited choice. But the Buddhist path asks us to look deeper. Is a person who is free to eat anything they want, but who is a slave to their unhealthy food cravings, truly free? Is a person who is free to say anything they please, but who is compelled by their anger to constantly lash out and damage their relationships, truly free? Is the billionaire who is free to buy anything, but who is consumed by anxiety about losing their wealth, truly free? This external freedom, while valuable, is not the ultimate freedom. A life spent simply following our strongest impulses is not a life of liberty. It is a life of slavery to our own inner conditioning. True freedom is not the ability to get everything you want. It is the ability to not be a slave to your wanting. True freedom is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act with courage and wisdom in the presence of fear. True freedom is not about controlling the world to eliminate all triggers and discomforts. It is about cultivating a mind that cannot be hijacked by those triggers. It is an inner freedom. It is the freedom that is born in the sacred pause, in the space between stimulus and response. It is the freedom to choose. This is the ultimate response, the response of a liberated mind. There is a beautiful analogy for this understanding of freedom: the relationship between a sculptor and a block of marble. A master sculptor is presented with a huge, raw block of stone. This block of marble is the given reality of our life. It is our genetics, our upbringing, our past experiences, the first arrows that life shoots at us. The sculptor cannot change the fundamental nature of this particular block. It may have hidden flaws, an unexpected crack, a difficult grain running through it. These aspects are outside of her control. An unskilled, reactive person would fight the stone. They would complain about its flaws. They would curse its difficult grain. They would try to force it into a shape it does not want to take. And in their rage and frustration, they might strike it foolishly and shatter the entire block. This is the reactive life, a life spent at war with the given reality. But the master sculptor's response is entirely different. Her work begins not with force, but with deep, mindful attention. She walks around the stone, observing it from all angles. She runs her hands over its surface, feeling its texture, its temperature. She studies its grain, its lines, its potential flaws. She does not judge the stone for being what it is. She accepts its reality completely. This is the practice of wise observation. Then, with this deep understanding, she picks up her mallet and chisel, and here is where her freedom lies. Her freedom is not in wishing for a different, more perfect block of marble. Her freedom is in her absolute power to choose where she will place the chisel. With each conscious, intentional tap, she responds to the nature of the stone. She does not fight the grain, she works with it. She might even see a flaw not as a mistake, but as an opportunity, incorporating the crack into the very design of the statue, making it a feature of its unique beauty. She is in a creative dialogue with reality. She is not reacting to the stone, she is responding to it. And from this responsive, skillful, and patient process, a work of profound beauty and grace emerges from the rough, imperfect block. The final statue is a testament not to the quality of the marble, but to the wisdom of the sculptor's response. We are all this sculptor. The block of marble is the unchangeable stuff of our lives, what happens to us. Our freedom, our power, our entire creative and spiritual life lies in where we choose to place the chisel of our attention and our action in each moment. We cannot always choose our circumstances, but we can always choose our response. This is the ultimate freedom, and it is a freedom that no external force can ever take away from us. This is not a freedom that we must wait to experience in some distant, enlightened future. It is a freedom we can practice right now, in the midst of our ordinary, imperfect lives. Every moment becomes an opportunity. Every time you feel the sting of criticism, you have an opportunity to practice the freedom of non-defensiveness. Every time you feel the pull of a compulsive craving, you have an opportunity to practice the freedom of conscious choice. Every time you are caught in traffic, you have an opportunity to practice the freedom of patience. Every time you interact with a difficult person, you have an opportunity to practice the freedom of compassion. The difficult, messy, and frustrating moments of our lives are not obstacles to our practice. They are the practice. They are the resistance that allows us to build the muscle of a wise and free heart. We have journeyed from the pain of a life lived as a puppet to the empowering realization that we are the sculptor of our own experience. We are no longer a piece of driftwood tossed about by the chaotic waves of life. We are the skillful sailor who, while unable to control the wind or the sea, can use them both to navigate with purpose and grace. We now understand that happiness is not determined by the weather we encounter, but by our skill in responding to it. Life is not what happens to us. The first arrow is simply the raw, uncarved stone. Our life is the meaning we create, the story we choose to tell, the response we chisel into the hard marble of reality. This is the art we have been learning together, the art of response. It is the art of waking up from the dream of reactivity and stepping into the reality of conscious choice. It is the art of being free. Let us now, in closing, gather the threads of this entire journey, from the first recognition of our reactive pain to this discovery of a profound and liberating peace, and reflect on how we can carry this practice forward into every moment of our lives. We have now reached the end of our shared path, a journey that has taken us from the painful chaos of a reactive life to the quiet, dignified peace of a responsive one. We began with the feeling of being a puppet, our strings pulled by the slightest provocation from the world and the turbulent storms of our own mind. We saw how we unknowingly inflict the greatest part of our own misery with the second arrow of our reaction, and how we are held captive by the invisible ropes of our past conditioning. But through our exploration, we discovered a profound truth. We are not puppets, and we are not prisoners. We are sculptors, and the raw, imperfect, and beautiful block of marble we have been given is our own life. We have learned that between stimulus and response, there is a sacred space, a pause, that holds all of our freedom. We have learned to find refuge in that space by anchoring ourselves with the simple, steady rhythm of our breath. From that place of calm stability, we have learned to consult the compass of our own wise intention, choosing to act from a place of kindness and clarity, rather than from the blind impulses of fear and anger. We have learned to view the world through the transformative lens of compassion, seeing the suffering behind harmful actions and thereby freeing ourselves from the poison of resentment. We have, in essence, learned to stop fighting the river of life and have instead begun to learn how to swim with grace. Let this be the core message you carry forward from our time together. Emotional mastery is not the cold, empty state of a life without feelings. It is not about suppressing our anger or denying our sadness. It is the warm, spacious, and courageous capacity to feel everything fully, to welcome all the weather of our human experience into the vast sky of our awareness without being swept away. It is the unshakable understanding that while we cannot always choose what happens to us, we always have the power to choose our response. This power is the only true freedom, and it is a freedom that no person or circumstance can ever take from you. This is not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a lifelong practice. There will be moments when the old reactive habits resurface. The serpent of anger will stir. The ghost of fear will appear. This is not a sign of failure. It is simply a reminder that this path is a practice, not a performance. Every time you are triggered is a new opportunity to practice the sacred pause. Every challenging emotion is a new teacher, inviting you to respond with greater wisdom and compassion than before. Every day provides a fresh canvas on which to practice the art of a skillful life. You are no longer a helpless victim of your inner world. You are its wise and gentle caretaker. The key to your own peace is, and has always been, in your own hands.